This meeting will come to order. This is the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. This is our meeting of November 1st, 2011. We are continuing with the public hearing that we began last week on the following applications. 3 items, all for the same site. 4185 Black Rock Turnpike, application of New Way Associates, LLC, to establish a neighborhood design district on land presently residence AAA zone. Number 2, zoning regulation amendment, application of New Way Associates, LLC, to amend section 12.10.3.2 of the Fairfield zoning regulations. And third, 4185 Black Rock Turnpike, special permit application of Fairfield Gateway, LLC, pertaining to the construction of a 2-story medical building. Tonight, we will be going to public comment. I believe we have one more item that's going to be handed up for the applicant first in response to a question we raised.
Right, there's a request, I think, for an elevation of the retaining wall so that you can visually see how it tapers from the 10 to the 3. So I want to just submit that to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Thanks. Oh, there's going to be a trip there. Thank you. Okay, we'll be going to public comment at this time. And just to explain to the public how this works, the applicant has finished their presentation. We now go to public comment, where we invite members of the public who would like to speak to come up to the microphone to address the commission. If you have any questions or comments, they're addressed to us as the commission, not to the applicant. Upon the conclusion of the public comment, the applicant has an opportunity to present a final statement of his case. At that time, we as commissioners can raise any questions that a member of the public has raised. We can raise any additional questions that we may have. If you could just, though, direct all of your comments to us as the commission. When you begin, come up in any order, one at a time. Just give us your name and your address. And if you have a written statement, you may submit it to us at that time. And most importantly, be relaxed. Don't worry. Take your time. Before we begin with the public comment, though, I would like just to read into the record the emails that we've received. Not the entire text of them, but just the names of the people who have submitted the emails to the commission. If you're here, we have read your email, and you could don't worry about that. The emails we've received come from the following individuals: Ellen Gould of 648 Harbor Road, Thomas Daly, 10 Southport Woods Drive, Louis Ruggio, 150 Hollydale Road, Celeste and Bert Hilton, 3791 Congress Street, Mary Rogers, 2713 Bronson Road, Alan Rogers, 2713 Bronson Road, Russ Mitchell, 210 Cobblers Hill Road, Pat and Grant Leshin of Congress Street, Jeffrey O'Brien and Manami Kasaka of 39 Eaton Court, Louis Petrillo, 33 Alexandria Court, Gianfranco and Diane Capasso of 324 Mine Hill Road, Michael Kinney, 2980 Congress Street, Phyllis Collins, 1760 Hillside Road, Neil Spagna, 1001 Hillside Road, Richard and Kathleen Fitzsimmons, 15 Chandler's Lane, David McKenzie, 505 Merwins Lane, Virginia Sanford, 1831 Hillside Road, Christopher Haynes, 95 Penburn Drive, Sam and Jennifer Cargill, 2444 Bronson Road, Maxine Vipond, Greenfield Hunt, Mickey Vipond, Greenfield Hunt, Martin and Elaine Berger, 2905 Bronson Road, Edward Epifano, 3131 Congress Street, Joseph Formato, 3870 Black Rock Turnpike, Susan and Thomas Libby, 501 Black Rock Turnpike, Scott and Lori Stimson, Morehouse Highway, Maria Ferreira, Greenfield Hunt, Susan Bonner, 1396 Hillside Road. Robert Franchini, Joan Drive. Edward and Ellen Epifano, 3131 Congress Street. Goldie Nijensen, 530 Hillside Road. Pat Peabody, 22 Dean Lane. Wendy Morgan, do not have an address for her. Michael Boskello, 41 Revere Lane, Greenfield Hunt. Karen Shandalia, 18 Hamilton Court, Greenfield Hunt. Kim and Kathleen Hill, Greenfield Hunt. Bob and Joan Davidson, Greenfield Hunt. John Faith, no address. Alastair Crawford, Black Rock Turnpike. Stephanie Thompson, 2824 Bronson Road. Scott Sumner, 221 Farmstead Hill Road. Bob and Joan Davidson, a second email from them. Diane Harp Jones, 1410 Burr Street. George Russell as president of the Sasquatch Association for Southport Improvement. Richard S. Burchick and Nancy L. Burchick of 4364 Black Rock Turnpike. So those are the individuals who have submitted emails to the commission at our email address. They've been circulated to all the members of the commission. They're part of the record, and we have reviewed those. So again, we'll open up the floor now to any member of the public who would like to comment on this application. Just come on up to the microphone and you may begin. Anyone?
My name is Lawrence Erdman. I live at 1386 Hillside Road. Last week we were drowned in details. We were told about oak trees, brick colors, energy-efficient windows, about retaining walls, and two-story buildings that are really 3 stories tall. These details divert direct examination of the substance of the request before the Commission. The essence of this application is not a myriad of details. This application asks for a change. It asks for a downgrade in zoning from AAA to Neighborhood Design Business District. Any change should be for the good, and it should directly benefit the area. But this change is a downgrade. The benefit is not to local residents, it is to neighboring towns. It is deliberately chosen to be an exit of the Merritt Parkway, serving the towns predominantly to the north. There already exists on this site a 1.7 acres Neighborhood Design Business District. No argument is given by the applicants for the necessity of expanding a district that already exists. There's adequate space for medical offices on these 1.7 acres if that's what they want. The expansion itself is not justified. Secondly, last week, we were frightened by false fears. Accept this downgrade, we were told, or worse will come. We'll be invaded by outsiders. First, we're threatened by a strip mall, but this is a 1.7 acre property. It is not conducive to a strip mall. 1.7 acres is equivalent to the Mercado and the Pickett's antique shop in Greenfield Hill and their associated parking, far from a strip mall. Then we're threatened with an affordable housing project intended as a scare tactic to the neighbors. This is probably the oldest red herring in the lawyer's bag of tricks. There's no need here for affordable housing, there's no application, there's no proposal. These 1.7 acres are at the bottom of a cliff. There's a stream and wetlands high up on the property. There's no public transportation. How much affordable housing can be built on 1.7 acres? Even if needed, there are far better sites in Fairfield. The sky is falling, in my opinion, is inappropriate lawyering for a zoning downgrade. Next, we were confounded by consultants. We all know this intersection. We know it is a nightmare. 1 death at this intersection in the last month. Even my next door neighbor had an accident there in the last few months. There's endless delays, There's constant frustration. To state that there will be no impact on traffic belies common sense. It belies the common knowledge of everyone here. This is already a traffic nightmare. The engineer was hired by the developer to invent a no-harm scenario, but based on arbitrary assumptions and an opaque algorithm, he came up with a no-harm result, assuming 82 cars for a 177 space parking lot, 40% of traffic from local roads for a 55,000 square foot building in AAA residential zoned area. Where are all those people going to come from? The people coming to this facility will be coming down the Merritt. Finally, no trucks were ever mentioned in the traffic analysis. This facility cannot exist without deliveries and pickups, and many, if not most, of those deliveries and pickups are going to use the local roads because they're banned from the Merritt. Last week also, we were lined out by the lawyers. I live a few hundred yards from Mr. Fallon, yet he claims he has a stake in the downgrade of this property, and those of us in Greenfield Hill do not. We all drive by this intersection very often. Some of us drive by this intersection every day. It is part of our neighborhood. It is our entrance to the Merritt. It's the way we get to other towns. Its appearance and its traffic affect the rural character of this area. This is our town, our neighborhood, despite claims of an attorney who wants to disenfranchise us from an interest in this location. We actually like it the way it is. Then, I think we are petrified by the possible precedent an affirmation of this request would bring. This complex would invite development further on up Black Rock Turnpike. The other 15 acres owned by the applicant is not the problem. This is a cliff. It's the adjacent parcels further up Black Rock that are the problem, and the developers have interests in these parcels further up the road. Who will build a AAA residence next to this building and amidst the traffic that it's going to generate? No one. The owners of the adjacent properties will claim hardship once this building would be approved and ask for another downgrade. And if this precedent is set, these downgrades will be very difficult to stop. And further, the necessity of the insidious changes in parking and lighting regulations inherent in this application will diminish not only the area, but the town everywhere. Finally, we would face factories on what were farmlands. The building design, it was said, is inspired by a red brick factory building in Norwalk. If we wanted to live near a red brick factory building, we could have lived there, not where we live now. Our neighborhood is rural, it's bucolic, and we want it to stay that way. The owner of that factory in Norwalk chose to live in AAA zone in Westport, probably because he didn't like the traffic, the parking, or the lighting near the building. This downgrade is bad for its immediate residential neighbors. It's bad for the neighbors in Hoyden Hill, in the Greenfield Hunt. It's bad for the neighbors in Greenfield Hill. It's bad for all of Fairfield. It may be good for the residents of Trumbull and Shelton and Orange driving down the Merritt to a facility such as this, who would only add to the traffic at the intersection, but it is not good for our residents and our neighbors. This application should be denied. Please make sure it is.
My name is Kevin Donahue. I live at 15 Dean Lane, Greenfield Hunt. I've been on the board of directors at Greenfield Hunt for the past 7 years and past president for 4 years. At a community open meeting this past July 14th at the pool, Paul Richter explained in detail the proposed medical building to all that were present. There followed a question and answer period, and everybody that was there had a chance to ask questions and were apparently satisfied at that time. I firmly believe that if the current planned factory, which is an eyesore, is replaced by the proposed 35,000 square feet medical building, our community will be enhanced by the good-looking two-story building. Furthermore, the construction should bring about work for local construction people and add additional real estate taxes to the Fairfield coffers. We all know the land will be sold by the two retiring owners, and I and my family do not want to see a strip mall, a large assisted living nursing facility, or a not-for-profit affordable housing unit. Please vote in favor of the proposed medical building. Thank you.
Everyone will get a chance, don't worry. If you could just wait till you get to the microphone. The reason is we record all the meetings. We're making a record, and the microphone can't pick up voices until you get to the podium.
Okay, my name is Pat Peabody.
Thank you.
And I live at 22 Dean Lane in Greenfield Hunt. Kevin, who is a neighbor of mine, just spoke of the July meeting at the pool. Well, there were a few people that attended. Many of us were away. I have presented to Jim Wendt today a signature of 47 homeowners that are against this, and I'd like that to be put on the record. I would have gotten more people, but the weather, the inclement weather, prevented me from getting more. But 47 homeowners are against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peabody. The staff has indicated they have that petition. It'll be circulated to the members so we can acknowledge that.
My name is Olive Stokes, and I live at 37 Christmas Tree Lane in Southport. I'm speaking today as a resident of Fairfield for the last 37 years. I do wear a number of other hats, but today I'm speaking only as a resident of Southport and of Fairfield, and I'd like to address a couple of the issues that this medical office building will have an impact on in our town. First, I'd like to address the issue of the amendment that has been proposed to Section 12.10.3.2. This amendment will impact the parking and lighting decisions in all existing and future neighborhood design business districts throughout our town. The current regulation, as they're written, are very clear, concise, and simple. And they are designed specifically to protect against a strip mall effect in the neighborhood design business districts. It defines the location for off-street parking to be beside or behind a structure. And it also requires that all lighting be complementary to nearby streetscape. This proposed amendment leaves the decision on parking and lighting up to all of you and future commissions, which could result in unintended and unforeseen consequences throughout Fairfield. It's not just for this particular application. The amendment weakens the zoning regulations by empowering your commission to make adjustments to parking and lighting plans based on, and I put in quotes, particular circumstances, which is what the amendment requires, and they are not specifically defined in the amendment. It complicates your decision-making process and opens the process to mischief. It would be more appropriate for the developers to ask for a variance from ZBA applicable to their particular needs rather than asking for this amendment, which smacks of an end run around the variance process. This amendment not only affects this case, but all situations throughout neighborhood design business districts in Fairfield. In the interest of protecting the impact of parking and lighting in all neighborhood design and business districts throughout our town, I ask you, I wonder what you think I'm going to say. I ask you in the interest of maintaining an honest and consistent process in making your decisions, I urge you to vote against this amendment. Now, I'd also like to make a few comments about the impact of this building. I'm a frequent traveler on the Merritt Parkway because I am a life trustee at the Discovery Museum up on Park Avenue, and I'm also happen to be a shopper at the Trumbull Mall. Now, my husband may think I'm a life trustee of the Trumbull Mall, but I'm not. And I do drive home south on the Merritt Parkway often. And I get off that southbound exit 44 off of the Merritt Parkway and onto the Black Rock Turnpike and over to Congress Street. And it's often a challenge, no matter what time of day you're driving. And sometimes it can be quite dangerous. The arbitrary assumptions, unfortunately, presented to us last week by the town engineer contradict the obvious. Adding more congestion, which this office building would do to this intersection of Black Rock Turnpike, is not only not sound planning, but it really isn't responsible planning. Further, I'd like to comment on the downgrade of zoning and how that is going to impact the rest of the town of Fairfield. If this downgrade of zoning is permitted here, it sets a precedent about which all residents of Fairfield should be concerned. There are a number of non-conforming parcels nearby, which you heard Larry speak to, and one even abuts this property. These owners can cry hardship in seeking a future zoning change for their own properties if you approve this request, which will only then expand commercialization up Black Rock Turnpike. As I've said, expanding the neighborhood design business district by permitting a downgrade of a portion of this AAA zone property sets a precedent and will have repercussions throughout our town. What happens up here on Upper Black Rock Turnpike will not stay up here on Upper Black Rock Turnpike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Stokes. And just one clarification, the engineer you referred to is actually the applicant's traffic engineer. That's not the town engineer.
Oh, I didn't mean to say that. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Any other member of the public who wishes? Sir.
Hi, my name is Michael Marr, and I reside at 50 Springer Road. And I'm here tonight to speak in favor of the medical office building that's proposed for 4185 Black Rock Turnpike. I've been a town resident for a little over 12 years now, and I have 2 children that attend the Burr School. And as a resident and a father, I understand full well the constraints that the town's budget faces. And as a neighbor, I drive by this property numerous times during the week. Now, I think we are all in agreement that the plant factory property is currently an eyesore and something really needs to be done. And it's my opinion that this property is really ill-suited for a large residential development or a commercial strip mall. As I stated before, our budgets, especially within the school system, are stretched very thin, and I don't think the town needs the additional strain that would be placed on it from a large residential development. And I think this medical building would be ideal for Fairfield for the following reasons. I think the town would directly benefit from an increase in the tax base, and this would be accomplished without adding additional stress to the school systems, the residents, or the municipality. Because of its location, I don't believe this development would really have a significant impact on the traffic situation on Upper Black Rock Turnpike or in Greenfield Hill, especially when you would compare it to maybe another development that might potentially go in there. And I think the testimony that we heard last week really bears this out. I believe this project will bring both temporary and permanent jobs to the town and will have the ancillary benefit of increasing business for our existing merchants. And I think in this current economic climate, an increase in town employment should not be discounted. Lastly, I believe the project will clean up the property, it will address the on-off issues with the ramp on the Merritt Parkway, and will be both an architectural and aesthetically pleasing benefit to the town. In closing, I was here last week and I really don't believe that the panel is going to hear a more reasoned and well-thought-out proposal for the development of this property. And I urge you to consider that and to pass this measure and allow this to go through.
Thank you, Mr.
very
Marr.
much.
For the record, my name is Bruce McDonald, and I reside at 74 Hamilton Court. I've lived in Fairfield Hunt for 5 years, and in the town of Fairfield for the past 33 years. Greenfield Hunt, as many of you know, is a 100-home community immediately adjacent to the northern boundary of the property in question, and that the land is being discussed. This, quite frankly, is my neighborhood, the neighborhood of my neighbors. I wish to speak strongly in favor of the proposal before the Commission for the following reasons, and I apologize for the repetition, but I'm sure you're used to it. The current business, the Plant Factory, is closing and the property is for sale. It will be developed in the next 24 months, I am certain, given its location and the access to sewers and city water. If this modest proposal is denied, I am confident there will be another proposal before this Commission that will have greater and a more negative impact on our community. I believe that the proposed 35,000 square foot medical office building will have the least impact for the development of this land. Yes, there will be impact on traffic, but as presented last week, the peak traffic hours for the Merritt Parkway will not coincide with the peak flow into a building housing physician offices. The extension of the neighborhood design business district zoning change that is being requested actually reflects the same business use of that property that has been conducted on that land for the past 35 years. I believe the project, as designed by Mr. Franzen, is aesthetically well designed and will serve the needs of the community, and I urge you to vote in favor of this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Anyone else? Sir, come on up. Just give us 1 second. They've got to adjust the our antiquated sound system again.
Sure.
Schools. Yes, that's true. It's a problem with the school. We have our sound system, and when they designed the building, something happened in the room where they put the controls for the amplification system. They have some type of electronics next to it running the HVAC system. So whenever that fan somehow kicks on, it puts interference on our sound system. The engineers made a mistake when they designed the system. So may as well start as good as it's going to get.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Nathan Schindler. I live at 23 Taquashi Place, about a mile south of the proposed development, right off Black Rock Turnpike. And I come here to speak in favor of the proposed development. I think it will add, not only, as people have mentioned, the tax base to the town, but actually also add needed facilities to the town residents. I think that we've talked a bit, I've heard quite a bit about traffic and traffic congestion on Black Rock. I think that in the upper part of Fairfield, northern part of Fairfield, we're going to need more medical facilities as population ages. And if they're not going to go here, they're going to go another place in Black Rock, potentially farther south. I don't know, I have no idea, but there's already a lot of traffic farther south on Black Rock. And so putting it up in the northern end where it's a little separated from the rest of Black Rock traffic may be a good thing. That's just my personal thought. And also, I think it's also very consistent with the past use of this property. I've lived in Fairfield for the better part of 20 years now, since I grew up here in Fairfield Public Schools, and moved away for a little while, but came back. Now own a home right off Black Rock Turnpike, near where my family and my wife's family lived. The Plant Factory has been a commercial location for as long as I can remember, and I think that this is, as opposed to some people calling it a downgrade, I think it's actually a correction of something that was missed when the neighborhood business zoning district was put in place, and I think this is actually a positive correction for Fairfield. So, thank you, Commission. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Schindler. Sir?
Good
Good evening. My name is James Thompson. I live at 2824 Bronson Road in Fairfield. And in full disclosure, I am an architect, and I'm not a NIMBY anti-development person. My comments this evening, going to the structure of this application, my specific concerns are first and foremost to the modification of the regulation itself as it relates to the definition of the neighborhood design business district, which impacts all design business districts throughout the town. And I find this application to defy the spirit and intent of Section 12.5.1 in terms of what the purpose of a neighborhood design business district is. Frankly, in reviewing the regulations again today, I failed to find, and I would love someone to point out to me, where within a neighborhood design business district medical office building is allowed as a special permit item, because I can't find that. I find that in the commercial design or design commercial district, but not in neighborhoods. Again, to reinforce the comments made earlier, I think we have a good neighborhood design business regulation that serves its purpose. There are aspects of this application which, frankly, I look at this as the creation of a design commercial district masquerading as a neighborhood design business district. And to that end, there is no positive benefit in approving a change in the regulation to facilitate this specific use. I mean, to speak to some aspects of the project itself beyond that as Part B, how does the applicant presume to waive or address the 4,000 square foot limitation within the regulation they're asking to be judged under to have a 35,000 square foot single tenant facility? This is not the type of thing that the regulation, even if you modify the section related to parking, we're not addressing the other aspects of the regulation. In any other neighborhood design business district, there are no tenants allowed to be in a space larger than 4,000 square feet. Now we have a single tenant, a single use, 35,000 square feet. I mean, based on this, we should have Walgreens in Stratfield. What's the difference? That went all the way to the state Supreme Court and was denied. So, again, other aspects of this application that I find a little disturbing, that I think, if you proceed down this course, need a more thorough explication and clarification on the part of the applicant. The intensity of site development communicated in this document presented to the public is frankly incomplete and not clear, is my opinion. The extent of features such as site retaining walls, which were discussed during the presentation last week, were absolutely minimized compared to what's actually going to happen. And I think that, if you move forward, needs further development and clarification to the commission and to the public, because there's a lot more going on here in earth moving, retaining walls, and site development structure than was explained last week by the project engineers. Site lighting has been brought up by several people. The requirements of 12.10.3.5.d, 0.6 to 0.9 foot candles, uniform lighting over the entire parking area, roadway. There is no way that the lighting plan shown on this scheme presented to the public will meet or conform to that without a substantial increase in the amount of lighting shown on the site and its potential negative impact to the neighborhood. We're talking about modifying parking and preparing a special permit. Read the parking regulation. What is the highest density of parking requirement of any use that's possibly allowed in a commercial design district? It's medical. Retail and professional, all substantially less parking, more square foot per parking space. Medical is the most intensive use possible for this site. And frankly, we wouldn't even be talking about this application if we weren't talking about taking the area that is existing currently as design business district and doubling it in size. So all of the crying wolf about affordable housing and God bless Avalon Homes should they come to Fairfield, and those sort of scare tactics and the use of the language strip mall, yes, it is your job to prevent the extension of the commercial district of Black Rock Turnpike from extending north of the Merritt. That's your job. So to take our regulations and turn them upside down and replicate the design commercial district and call it a neighborhood business district is inappropriate and should be denied. The applicant should approach this, as I said, with a variance or an effort to change it to what it really is, but not make it look like something that it's not. Thank you.
You were up already, sir. Come on.
Hello, I'm Edward Lane. I live at 4321 Black Rock Turnpike, which is just north of the site that you were talking about, the New Way group wants to put the building in. My concern is basically the consideration where we live north of it, that the elevation is only like 3 feet difference between where the parking ends and where our driveway goes in. And I don't think they took accommodations in enough to aesthetically like put like a wall up, not a wall, but like a berm or something like that to screen the residential people from the project that's going in the corner. I can't say I'm against the project entirely because I think they have a right to improve their property, but I do believe that they're not taking into consideration enough of the people that are just north of this site.
Are you immediately adjacent?
There's one house and then our house. So we do see the site as we go in our driveway, and there's only 3 foot difference between where this parking lot, which also comes down further than where the Hi-Ho ends. It's further down, and I also would think that that wall or that berm should be somewhere in between where that stops and where this petitions into that. So there's a difference in there of giving, with the lighting that they're talking about and the different things, they need to have some kind of compensation for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane. Mr. Kamara?
My name is Ken Camaro, and I live at 345 Carroll Road in Fairfield, near Fairfield U. I'd like to speak on behalf of the application because I think all things considered, those which I've heard so far, the pluses and the minuses, I think the pluses far outweigh any of the minuses in terms of the 100-year utilization of this particular site. It's been, I've been in town for 41 years, and I've shopped in the plant factory for many years. Right now, it's really quite a derelict site. I do believe the site lends itself very well to this layout and this utilization of the property. It's going to provide a nice bump up in employment of not only professional people, but all of the nurses and the phlebotomists that will work in that facility. When you operate a medical facility like this, there will be a bump up in the morning when the operators arrive, but there's a steady flow during the day. You don't get a huge peak like you do on Saturday morning at Stop and Shop. You have a steady flow of patients coming and going. So it's really an excellent application. If you take a look at the intersection of the Merritt Parkway and Route 58, these are robust transportation assets, and this is a fit, for that class of asset. I don't believe traffic is going to come to a standstill. I do believe that the whole area there needs a very serious look in terms of what are the most intelligent way to develop that crossroads north of the Merritt Parkway. On the other side of the road, you've got the Hi-Ho and a package store. This will be a medical center. I think you really are obliged to take a look at what's the best use of this land for all of the neighboring residential establishments. What is the best use over a 100-year period of time, realizing that gasoline is going to become much more expensive, and we do want to enable people to take the shortest auto ride necessary to get their day-to-day needs or their medical care. Lastly, I want to point out that the 65 and age and older population is growing from 950,000 to 1.5 million people in Connecticut. So I'm 71.
lived in Fairfield 41 years, so I'd like to see a nice medical facility there. And I think the residents in town and those who want to age in place, like myself, will benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kamara.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Lou Petrillo, and I live at 33 Greenfield Hunt, and I'm here to speak against the proposed medical center on the corner of Route 58 and Merritt Parkway. First of all, I believe the building is aesthetically unpleasing. It's going to change the character of the entire neighborhood. Everything north of the Parkway and other sections of Fairfield is all residential. Up from Greenfield Hunt, not too far, 58 is considered a scenic highway. I don't know how many roads are in the state of Connecticut. So at the beginning of this road, we're going to be looking at a building, I'm told it's twice the size of the Hi-Ho, and the elevation of 58 is going to be so you can look directly in the parking garage. And the point I'm trying to make is that this building does not belong on this site. And I also question the need for it. Today I had in my mailbox patches, Fairfield patch pages, and it lists all the doctors and medical facilities in Fairfield. And I really question, with 68 already in Fairfield, if we really need another medical facility, especially with the fact that there are so many vacancies around town, and a piece of property at the other end of Black Rock Turnpike, where the Miller Volkswagen used to be, would be much more suitable for a building of this magnitude and would service people that would come from out of town on Route 195. The building, it was said at a meeting we had on Saturday at the library, would be about 60 feet above the Merritt Parkway. And we got in a little bit of the plantings, and they were going to plant 3 sugar maples on the south side of it. So I don't really believe that that would be a screening of any kind to hide this building twice the size of the Hi-Ho. My second concern and primary concern is traffic. We all know the history of the Merritt Parkway. It was originally built in the 30s as a scenic highway. The estimated traffic at the time was 150,000 cars a year. It's probably 150,000 cars a day now, okay? And what that does, any increase in traffic on the Merritt Parkway increases the traffic at the exits. It's only logical. Southbound at exit 44 in the morning, okay, is stopped. It backs up onto the Parkway. I commute on the Merritt Parkway to New York. I make the right-hand turn, and many more, coming down Black Rock Turnpike, I make the right-hand turn into the ramp. Several mornings, a month, that's stopped. The traffic is stopped there. So, with that said, the additional traffic that this building would demand or command is not sustainable by the already overcrowded exit and entrance ramps. I would also question, we heard a traffic survey on the last Tuesday. Traffic engineer gave us his opinion on where the traffic would be, okay, or what it would be increased. I believe he said 2%. I mean, did they think that when they built the Merritt Parkway? So I don't think that number, quite honest with you, in due respect, is a legitimate number. Also, the state of Connecticut, they had a traffic survey, but the traffic survey, from what I understood, only counted cars. How many cars per hour went through this intersection, and they only did it for one day. Now, traffic surveys that I have understood to be more thorough actually come up with a plan for the egress and exiting from the site. And if you go up Route 58 and it's only 2 lanes and you try to make a left, you're going to get gridlocked down to the light at the bottom of the hill. Now, where is the proposal for any road widening, lights, or curbing that directs traffic north on 58, south on 58, and a turning lane into this property? Nobody has presented that. And I think that we should look to the Connecticut State Traffic Commission to find out their thoughts on that, on this already very dangerous intersection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petrillo. Ma'am?
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for letting us talk tonight. I haven't been here I came in late, but I don't believe...
You still have to give us your name for the record, though, please.
What? Oh, my name. Jane Talamini, 1125 Oldfield Road, Fairfield. Lifelong resident except for a brief hiatus in San Francisco. Almost as pretty as Fairfield. In the arguments for this application that I did hear last week, one overriding concept has been ignored: the name of the road. It's not the Merritt Turnpike. It's not the Merritt Thruway. It's not the Merritt Truck Route. It's not the Merritt Cart Route. It's a parkway. 2 syllables, parkway. So often we use words, and we use them so often we forget what they mean. But this one is very clear. A park is with fields, grass, trees, streams. If any structures, they're stone walls in Connecticut, bridges of stone. Way, of course, is a passage. So a parkway is a passage through a park. Now, this is a concept that was defined by Frederick Law Olmsted, a prominent landscape architect in the late 1800s. He was a Connecticut boy. He took weekend drives with his mother and father in the country around Hartford and came to love the Connecticut countryside. He's the one who came up with the concept of a parkway. At its inception, the Merritt Parkway epitomized his concept of a parkway. And today, for the most part, from the Greenwich, New York border north, the road retains the integrity of a parkway. Now, there have been some lapses in DOT judgment through the decades. But the DOT, with the Merritt Parkway Conservancy and the cooperation of towns through which the parkway passes, is restoring the integrity of this road. Metal rails and fences are replaced with wooden-like fences and rails. There are new plantings. The handsome bridges are being repaired. Now, there are several problem areas, and maybe that nothing can be done about at least one of them. But Route 7 interchange is unfortunate. The mines that were working at that time did not understand the concept I have just explained. The DOT's workshed around New Canaan, again, this great domed thing, is unfortunate. But the last thing I heard, they were going to try to plant it out. It's going to take big trees, but it can be done. Now, to me, the most egregious anti-parkway concept is right here in Fairfield, to our detriment, the Hi-Ho Motel, that architectural carbuncle with a most unfortunate name. This is Fairfield's shame. Now, how can we think of adding to our reputation for cultural amnesia by putting in this large medical building with what I understand is going to be an extensive parking lot of cars? This is not a place for this sort of building, not a place for this sort of intrusion into the landscape. I'm not saying it's not needed, I don't know. I myself, in this day of specialists in the medical field, think I have about 10 doctors covering me from head to toe. And I can take care of myself here in Fairfield, even with choice in some cases. But that's not for you to decide, probably. I don't know. I would say we don't need it. But we don't need it there. It will do more damage. It's a nightmare waiting to happen. Now, at the last meeting, someone said, this land has to be used. Why? Why does it have to be used? Because if not used this way, something really bad could be built? Well, let's not fall for scare tactics. This building is a threat to our relations with neighboring towns. Do towns relate to one another? Do they respect or do they disdain one another? Of course. Now, with all the towns along the Parkway, they're taking pride in the Parkway. Is Fairfield going to thumb its nose and say, we're going to do what we want, so tough on you? I hope not. That would be very embarrassing to live in a place that operated that way. But before you decide in this application, I ask you, please, 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 do two things. First of all, with all the research facilities we have at hand today, right at the tips of our fingers in our own houses, do some research on Frederick Law Olmsted. Fascinating man. And the things he did to this country are still with us, and they're beautiful. Do some research on parkways. There are beautiful ones. If you've driven the Taconic, it's lovely. Look around, see, just fill your mind with this concept. Then, get in your cars and drive the Parkway up to the Greenwich, New York border and come back to just beyond Fairfield. Now, this time of year, the trees have lost their leaves. You will see buildings. But imagine the scene from spring through fall. Then, I think, you will have the fortitude to deny this application. You will see that there is no other way to go. Deny it out of respect for the towns with which we share the Parkway. Deny it out of pride and appreciation for a parkway we've been lucky enough to have given to us. We didn't have to create it. It's ours. All we have to do is take care of it and honor it. Now I ask you, how easy and how sensible is that? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tillman. Any other member of the public wish to, sir?
My name is Stan Garrow. I live at 42 Eaton Court, Fairfield. I own a home in Greenfield Hunt, and I urge this commission to approve this application. I'm a retired attorney, and I was a former member of this very commission, most likely before some of you were born and others were small children. This area is very peculiar in that this very commission agreed to have Exxon built office buildings in Greenfield Hunt. An appeal was taken from it, and no one who took part in that appeal still lives in the town of Fairfield. I have lived in the town of Fairfield since 1962. And I urge this commission to act appropriately for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrow. Sir.
Good evening. My name is Craig Simpson. I live at 64 Hamilton Court, which is, of course, part of Greenfield Hunt. And unlike virtually everybody that stood up here tonight, I've only been here a matter of months and weeks, not years and decades and so forth. So I'm afraid I don't know all of the technical details that are confronting all of this. But I do know a couple things, and that is that we're very pleased to be part of this community and are certainly interested in maintaining the value of our home. And having been involved in this kind of thing where we formerly lived, it's hard for me to imagine a better proposal for this property, where certainly something is going to happen, than this proposed medical center. I attended the meeting on Saturday and certainly was very impressed with the planning and the considerations of the people involved. They all are part of this neighborhood as well. So those of us who speak on behalf of community and neighbors, I think, feel that we have that very spirit built into the proposal here. I think there's going to probably be increased traffic, whatever goes in there, but I've lived here long enough to tell you this. The real danger traffic in that area isn't this, it's Barcelona. And the cars going back and forth across the road in and out of that parking lot, and if somebody can stop that, they'll do a great deal to fix the traffic problem there. It's pretty crazy on most nights, certainly. Anyway, good for their business, but a little tricky for driving. At any rate, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. We look forward to spending many years in this neighborhood, and I believe that this new facility will be a real addition to it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Ma'am.
My name is Jane Connors, and I live at 24 Getty Circle, which is in Greenfield Hunt. And what I wanted to mention is that a few weeks ago, everyone in Greenfield Hunt received a letter outlining this project. It was signed by people who I was not familiar with. My understanding is they don't live there. And based on what was in that letter, it was horrendous. And I absolutely thought, this can't happen. We cannot let this building come. The way it was described, the dimensions of the building. But anyway, our community was good enough to have a meeting this past Saturday that I attended in the snowstorm in October. And after having been at that meeting and understanding what they want to put there, the fact that the land's going to be sold anyway, and what the alternatives could be, I honestly think that it's a very good choice. It's an excellent alternative. And I just wanted to bring forth to you the fact that had the petition made it up to my door prior to attending that meeting, I would have signed it, and I would have been against it. So most of the people in Greenfield Hunt received a letter that had erroneous information in it, and most of the people in Greenfield Hunt were not at the meeting on Saturday to hear what was really going to happen.
Thank you, Ms. Connors. Sir?
Good evening. Thank you for the hearing. My name is Greg Rudd. I live at 220 Hoydens Lane in Fairfield, Connecticut. Fairfield is a beautiful city. We all love it. And I thank you for being here tonight. I've attended some of the meetings open to the public concerning the plant factory and its request for the sale of its land for the proposed medical facility. I would first like to thank you and appreciate the long hours and the dedication that you and the board put in and having this hearing available for us tonight. My wife Crystal and I live up in Hoydens Lane, a short distance from the site being considered for the development of the medical facility. I've listened attentively and seen the plans presented and believe the facility would be an excellent addition to Fairfield. I'm absolutely in favor of it. In addition, I believe the parcel of land for a small community of 5 residential homes is a very good use of the land, adding to our tax base and the quality of life for the people of the city of Fairfield. And I hope you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rudd. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to speak? Sir.
Good evening. My name is Bill Trutt. I live at 40 Palmer Bridge in Greenfield Hunt. I've been a resident of Greenfield Hunt for the past 15 years. I am a member of the Board of Directors, but I am speaking as an individual and not on behalf of the board. Both my wife and I feel that the proposed medical building, 35 square 35,000 square foot proposed medical building is the best use for the plant factory property, and I urge the zoning board to grant the zoning change to allow the medical building construction. I am not willing to see nothing done based on the proposition that scare tactics are being used to threaten residents. My question is, what if affordable housing or a strip mall is an accurate prediction? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tress. Are there any other speakers? People wishing to comment? Mr. Green? I believe so.
Hi.
Hello, sir.
My name is Jesse Weiss. I live at 15 Alexandria Court, Greenfield, Hunt. Been a resident of Fairfield since 1962, the Hunt for the last 6, and I know what this meeting is. I was vice chairman of the Parking Authority for 12 years, and I know what went on when we had public hearings whenever we wanted to institute traffic laws. Now, I've heard a lot of things here tonight about scare tactics, and I think it's residents on both sides. They throw the traffic flag out, which anytime anybody wants to stop a development, that's the first thing they wave. I think a medical facility is an excellent application where we have here. The traffic will be in non-rush hour hours, primarily, would not impact. It certainly would not impact Greenfield Hunt, since most of the traffic will be traveling south to north on Black Rock Turnpike rather than the other way, would not impinge the entrance to Greenfield Hunt, which is a quarter of a mile north of this facility. And in addition, I think anything else that would go into that particular location would have a detrimental effect upon the real estate values where I live now. Also, when I stopped to look at that property, and I was taking a good look at it, the fact that it is zoned AAA zoning, it makes no sense. How anybody could build anything or would want to build anything of a residential area in that area on top of the Merritt Parkway with that rock wall sitting up there right now, the zoning makes no sense at all. You might as well put it to a good practical use, and I think a medical facility would be an excellent addition to the town of Fairfield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Ma'am?
I'm Jerry McMonagle. I live at 3931 Congress Street. I've been in the Greenfield Hill area just about 5 years now. And as far as the medical facility here, there was a question at the end of last week's meeting. And I think Mr. Fallon was going to get back to us at what the availability is in town of Fairfield, vacancy for medical use. I don't know if we get that information or not. Okay. But my major concern is traffic. I've seen over the last 5 years that the increase in traffic is phenomenal, and the roads just cannot accommodate it. The community cannot accommodate it. You get off exit 44, you close your eyes. Because if you're not in the right lane, you're either going to get pushed off or end up somewhere you don't want to be. So I think the traffic is a real issue. And another, 17 minutes in the morning when you're trying to get on the Merritt Parkway, for those of you that don't work and don't have a schedule to meet, it's a lot. It's a lot of time. And traffic does stop, and you're in a parking lot more than you're moving. I just think, one, I'm not sure if the medical facility is the appropriate use for the land, but the traffic is a major concern.
Thank you, Ms. Monagle.
I ask you to deny the
I'm sorry.
application.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Attorney Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. My name is Joel Green. I live at 52 Stoneley Road in Fairfield. I practice law in Bridgeport, the law offices of Green and Gross. I appear before you this evening on behalf of the Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Society, whose mission for the past 115 years has been to maintain the historic, beautiful, and rural character of Greenfield Hill, and to protect the interests of residents and property owners of Greenfield Hill for the general benefit and improvement of Greenfield Hill and the town of Fairfield generally. There are several officers and members who are present this evening, including John Jones, the president of Greenfield Hill. I also represent the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, and the Merritt Parkway Conservancy is a Connecticut corporation whose mission is to protect, preserve, and enhance the historic Connecticut roadway known as the Merritt Parkway, clearly, through education, advocacy, and partnership. And initially, I represented both entities in view of the common concerns they had with respect to this development. And Merritt Parkway Conservancy was specifically concerned with the impact of the project on vistas, on sight lines, on the character of the Merritt Parkway. I should point out that the Merritt Parkway Conservancy does not ordinarily get involved in local zoning and land use matters. And the Merritt Parkway Conservancy has elected not to oppose this application based upon the accommodations provided by the applicant set forth in the restrictive covenant, which is in the record. I should note that that has been slightly amended, but I don't think that there's anything significant for purposes of the commission. So we have two forms of the restrictive covenant in the record. I would ask, however, that you not read anything more into that position of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, either affirmatively or negatively in terms of this project. They are declining to participate in this application. So, I am appearing this evening on behalf of Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Society.
Mr. Chairman. I have a
Yes.
question about that.
It's public comment, so we probably...
And I think, just to clarify what I anticipate as a question, the document speaks for itself. The restrictive covenant that is of record in this matter speaks for the position of the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, and I just think, I just want to make that clear. Nothing more and nothing less.
Thank you.
On behalf of Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Society, the one thing that I could agree with at the last hearing was when Commissioner Kennelly said, "Wow," because I had the same reaction when the applicant completed their presentation on the application. Wow. I listened for over 2 hours, and with all due respect to the applicant, its counsel, its consultants, all of whom I hold in the highest esteem, for over 2 hours, the applicant neither fairly nor accurately addressed the standards in our zoning regulations and in the Connecticut general statutes with respect to the application for a change of our zoning map, the application for a change of text in our zoning regulations, and for the special permit that it sought in this instance. Interestingly, today, and it was, on the one hand, I was sort of frustrated at not being able to speak last week, and yet today I was able to take a quick look at the zoning file, and I was fascinated by, new things keep popping up with respect to this application. There are fundamental defects in this application, which I'll share with the Commission this evening. I'm also sort of fascinated by some of the information that's circulating around, and I hear back from people in town who are for this application and are against this application. And in fairness, there seems to be a lot of misinformation both ways, and I'll try to clarify a little bit of that this evening. To begin, first and foremost, this is not a popularity contest. And I know that a lot of people have come before the Commission for it, and a lot of people have appeared before the Commission against it. I'm encouraged by the fact that it seems there to be more against it, but it's not, at the end of the day, a popularity contest. There are standards in your regulations, there are standards in the Connecticut general statutes that govern the work that this Commission does on this application, and that ultimately will dictate how this application should be treated, and it should be denied. And the applicant began by trying to convince you whether or not this site was in Greenfield Hill or not. And I sort of had a reaction that on many levels it really doesn't matter whether it is or it isn't. I didn't really understand what the purpose and what the distinction was, and I think that it comes down to basically two things. First of all, there was opposition from all over town to the application. There was opposition from the center of Greenfield Hill, and I think that the applicant was trying to sort of distance itself and suggest that citizens who live in Greenfield Hill are not directly affected by this, and therefore their views and opinions and ideas on this maybe should not be given as much credence as those who lived in Greenfield Hunt, which is right up the hill, or people who live on Black Rock Turnpike, and obviously that's not also the way that this commission operates. I understand that this commission takes everybody's comments into account and values everyone's input in town. The applicant says it's not their neighborhood, it's not their business, it doesn't affect them, their thoughts and feelings don't count as much, and you as a commission should discount their input because this is not Greenfield Hill. Well, I'm here representing the Greenfield Hill Village Improvement Society. My clients consider it to be Greenfield Hill. Several people are here tonight who consider it to be Greenfield Hill, and there are actually several folks from Greenfield Hunt, as you've learned, who are opposed to this. I guess there's a petition with 47 names on it of 47 residents of Greenfield Hunt. There are folks who live on Black Rock Turnpike who are opposed to it. But I guess the other significant issue as to whether it's Greenfield Hill or not is how it factors into your master plan, and we will get to that in a moment. But the fact of the matter is that people all over Fairfield are concerned about this application because basically they don't think it's appropriate to expand an existing neighborhood design business district into a residential area to triple or more of the size of the existing neighborhood design business district. In other words, to make this NDBD 3 times its current size, to create what will become one of the largest, if not the largest commercial building in any of the existing 13 neighborhood design business districts in town. This is going to be the biggest. And including the parking, it will be the 5th or 6th largest office building in the entire town. And if you want to take out the parking, it'll be the 10th largest office building in the entire town. And there are folks who have a problem with that in a residential area. And it really doesn't matter if you want to call the site Greenfield Hill, do you want to call it Hoydens Hill, or do you want to call it St. Mortar? Because it's going to be one of the 3. And the master plan talks about how there can be some disagreement where the borders are that they've designated for the various areas described in the plan of conservation and development. But it really doesn't matter in this instance because none of those areas support as a development objective the increase in commercial development or expansion of commercial development in any of those 3 areas. And certainly there is concern, and we've heard from citizens from Southport, we've heard from citizens from Greenfield Hill, because there have been other attempts to expand neighborhood design business districts. There have been attempts to use commercial development in those areas for purposes for which neighborhood design business districts were not originally intended and have never been intended. So there is a great deal of concern. And that's why so many people all over Fairfield are checking in on this matter. So where are we now? You're all familiar with the plant factory, and there's a change proposed to the zoning map. And so I think what we ought to do is first consider this in terms of your basic policies and objectives. The policies and objectives, planning policies and objectives of the Plan and Zoning Commission. And putting aside the needs or desires of this particular applicant, do you as a commission believe that as part of your planning function, there's a need to expand any of the neighborhood design business districts in Fairfield? I mean, has that been on the radar? Because I'm not aware of that, and I suspect it hasn't been. Section 12.5 provides, the purpose of this district is to provide local neighborhoods, and I know you've heard this endlessly in the past several years, and certainly you heard it throughout the past 4 years involving the Walgreens application. The purpose of this district is to provide local neighborhoods with needed and desirable convenience goods and services in a manner which will not be detrimental to the surrounding residential areas. The uses permitted in this zone shall be limited to those which will primarily serve the local neighborhood and are consistent with the purposes for which the district was designed. Is there any inadequacy that you perceive with the current scheme of neighborhood design business districts? Because I'm not aware of one. They function beautifully. Is it a policy or goal to expand the neighborhood design business districts in terms of their number or size? I'm not aware, again, of any issues or planning objectives in that regard. So let's talk about this neighborhood design business district specifically, and I have some materials to share with the commission. All right, the first item that you'll see with the materials that I handed out to you is this depicts the neighborhood design business district in question on this site, and you can see that it makes up such a small fraction of the proposed development at its current dimension. And it's developable, again, and in its present form for any of the purposes designated in the neighborhood design business district, and I've provided you with a copy of that regulation. And frankly, I think it's a great comfort that any development on this site is never going to be too big or too offensive, because it's perfect for its location as it is. By virtue of the size, and if you look at the second page that I've provided you, this dictates the setbacks that are established under our zoning regulations. The pink area designates the setbacks, and I apologize to members of the public who can't see these materials and that I don't have a larger graphic, but there's a fraction of the site that can actually be occupied by a structure. Therefore, there is never going to be, without a significant zone change or change in your regulations, there's never going to be a massive commercial building on this site because the current zone simply will not accommodate it. So that is not a legitimate fear. And there was all this talk about a horrible strip mall and
yeah, we're just checking, as you know, we televise these for the residents of Fairfield. Are you able to get a shot of these for the TV? Do you want them up on the podium? Does that, or on the board? Would that help you for TV?
They're kind of small.
Okay. Okay, we just wanted to check.
what I can do is
You can hold it up.
I can scan them and send them to the commission electronically tomorrow.
Oh, it's not us as much as we're filming this for TV now.
Okay.
Our hearings are all on public access TV, 9 o'clock in the mornings, I believe.
This one right now.
I think we're on 9 o'clock in the mornings and then various hours throughout the day. And 11, what?
I know, but the point is, you could hold it up and they can...
And the question is, you want them to hold one up and maybe you could do a zoom in on them? Would
If
that
the
help?
counselor holds it up. If you go like this, Mr. Green, if you hold this, if you have a copy... Oh, me to do it, oh, all right. Sure.
Stop talking, hold it up.
All right.
So the point is that there is a limited developable area on the site as it exists. And certainly the neighborhood design business districts limit the nature and character of the kind of businesses that can go there, and they are, by definition, suitable for the local neighborhood. I guess the question I would ask you is, again, without this application, was it ever the feeling of this commission, or is there any policy or objective that what is lacking at exit 44 on the Merritt Parkway is a more vibrant and robust neighborhood design business district? And again, I haven't heard that objective. Do you feel that this neighborhood design business district is somehow inadequate? And I will tell you that presumably This neighborhood design business district was created to conform to the reality of the day, and the reality of the day was that there was the plant factory. And the plant factory was a permitted use in a neighborhood design business district, and it was a permitted use in a residential zone. And I will venture, and this is pure speculation, that it wasn't a design commercial district for a reason. Because the drafters of the regulations, when they created this as a neighborhood design business district, said, we don't want unlimited commercial development on this corner on Black Rock Turnpike. And I'm not aware of any call by the community to expand the commercial development in this neighborhood design business district. And what I'd like to focus on now is what has been limited to a medical office use in a neighborhood design business district by virtue of the agreement that's in place with the Merritt Parkway Conservancy, and that is that this will only be used for medical offices pursuant to the agreement. And I suppose I'm going to ask whether you as a commission believe, as part of your planning function, that there is a need to create incentives for more medical office buildings in Fairfield as a planning function. And really, I'm not aware that there is presently a need for more medical office space by any objective measure, by any expert who's appeared on behalf of this applicant. And what I have provided you with this evening is a chart that comes from CoStar. CoStar Group is the world leader for commercial real estate intelligence. It's commercial real estate's leading provider of information, analytic, and marketing services. And at the present time, as you can see, the data that I've provided to the Commission demonstrates that at present in Fairfield, there is a total of 2,043,000 square feet of office space. That's total existing office space in Fairfield is 2,043,000 square feet. At the present time, there is total available office space of 159,142 square feet. That's 159,000 square feet of office space is presently available. Total available medical, and this is a little bit deceptive, because what this means is dedicated medical only, is 61,531. And just as the regulations talk about professional offices, that is not to say that the other 159,000 cannot be used for medical, but there is only designated as described as limited to medical use space of 61,000 feet, and I hope I'm clear with that.
Is the 159 in addition to the 61, or is the 61 a portion of the 159?
The 61 is a portion of the 159, and so the vacancy rate is 7.8% in Fairfield, except that GE is factored into that, and if you take GE out, which is not truly available office space to the public, the vacancy rate in Fairfield is 10%. And this specifies all of that, and you can see a listing of every bit of rentable building area in Fairfield, the available space, and the total space where, again, there's that limitation that it can only be used for medical space. And again, where it just says office and says unknown, that's not to say that it can't be used for medical. So the point is, there is plenty of space throughout Fairfield for medical offices that is vacant, existing, and ready to be leased.
Attorney Green, is this rentable space or rentable plus condominium space? If you understand, we have certain buildings in Fairfield that are condominiums.
I think this is just a lease for lease. That's my understanding, and that's the way the program was run.
Thank you.
So So really, Fairfield's doing well, and we are actually doing better with our vacancy rate. We have less vacant space than Fairfield County as a whole, which, as I understand it, is something on the order of 16%. So in that context, do you really feel the need to create more opportunity for medical offices where we have so much medical office space already available in Fairfield? And by the way, what is proposed, and just so we're clear because there seems to be confusion, what is proposed, as I understand it, is a 55,473 square foot building. That's 55,473 square feet. Now, of that, the parking area is 20,430 feet. Therefore, the building tenant total, and this is on the front of one of the drawings that the applicant submitted, is 35,043 feet. So 35,043 is the what I'll call they call it building tenant total. So what that means is, based on this information and data from CoStar, with the garage, this would be the 5th largest office building in the town of Fairfield. And without the garage, it will be, in other words, just the 35,000, it would be the 10th largest office building in town. And I provide, so when Dr. McDonald, for example, said this is a modest building or a modest plan when he spoke for the public, I think there's sort of a misunderstanding as to the size and scale of what's proposed here. And actually, it's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog, because the other thing that I think people don't understand is that, and I provide the commission with this material, the hi-ho, this is the tail wagging the dog. The hi-ho is, I provided you with the assessor's card. The hi-ho is just 16,544. So this is not like sneaking a little extra commercial onto the hi-ho site. This is double. This building is double the size of the square footage of the hi-ho site. And frankly, the master plan does not support the notion of putting more medical office buildings anywhere. It does provide, as a development goal, creating more office space in the Commerce Drive area, and there is opportunity to do that. And frankly, we're all waiting for office development that is planned as part of the train station development, and there's other office development planned for the Commerce Drive area. But the fact is, the master plan does not support this proposal. And what I'd like you to do is, don't take my word for it, and don't take Attorney Fallon's word for it. Read the master plan, and I have a complete copy of the master plan that I guess I'll put into the record for reference by the commission this evening. And I also have an excerpt from the master plan that has the significant portions that I think the commission should refer to, and this is important. Don't take my word for it again, and don't listen to Attorney Fallon any more than you listen to me. This simply says, and you can see it on page 32 of the excerpt I provided. That was inartfully put, but on page 32 of the master plan, we'll delete that for TV. Page 32 of the master plan, and this is what I was referring to earlier. It says the commission recognizes that there is likely to be broad-ranging opinion as to the borders of depicted areas on the map. And if you go to the next page, you'll see map Roman numeral 1-6, and based on the planning area boundaries, this site is located in that corner, what I will call the easternmost corner of Greenfield Hill. On that map, you can see the Merritt Parkway, you can see the exit ramps that are depicted, and it's right there. But it's on the border of Hoydens Hill, and it's on the border of St. Mortar. So, what are the development policies? I refer you to page 34, which is the next page, and the policies for Greenfield Hill. And it refers to the Greenfield Hill Business Center is a neighborhood design business district which promotes uses appropriate to the area, provides safeguards from overexpansion, and limits business commercial uses to those of a neighborhood scale. So that's sort of where the Mercado is, and at the intersection of Hillside and Bronson. And it says only uses of this nature should be encouraged in this business center so that business uses complement the residential area. It then says, as another policy, zoning regulation amendments which would increase permitted density of development should be discouraged in order to preserve the character of the area. So certainly that is a count against the notion of building a 55,000 square foot building and the uses and the level of density and business intensity that that brings. It then says, undeveloped areas should be examined for potential acquisition by the town or designation as open space, especially if such areas link other open space areas or abut existing town holdings. And the point is, there's nothing in the Greenfield Hill business development plan or policy that was established in 2000 that suggests that you should expand commercial uses anywhere in Greenfield Hill. On page 37 is the Hoydens Hill description. And Hoydens Hill, the policy says, and on page 38, it says, policies are the expansion of recreational opportunities should be encouraged, open space and recreational facilities should be connected, and undeveloped parcels should be considered for acquisition by the town for open space, especially Bridgeport Hydraulic Company parcels. Most interesting is the Samp Mortar Black Rock Turnpike district, which is on page 38. And this is interesting because clearly Samp Mortar and Black Rock Turnpike extends into the commercial area we know on Black Rock Turnpike. And it says for Samp Mortar, which clearly was conceived to be more intensely developed than Hoydens Hill or Greenfield Hill, it says for even Samp Mortar, expansion of commercial districts should be resisted. If that is a policy that was established for the Samp Mortar and Black Rock Turnpike area, then certainly it applies more so to Greenfield Hill and to Hoydens Hill. And the point is, again, there is no basis under the master plan under which it can be found that this idea, this plan, is consistent with the master plan. And for the applicant to simply say that economic development is encouraged, which the applicant did in their presentation, yes, the master plan does say that, but it does not say that for here. It says that for other areas of town where commercial development is appropriate. Now, if you find that this is not consistent with the master plan, then this plan should be denied. And I have provided you with a quote from Fuller on land use. And Fuller refers to Section 8.2, and he says, in the treatise on zoning and land use in Connecticut, Section 8-2 of the general statutes specifically provides that zoning regulations shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan. That is our master plan. The enactment of or change in zoning regulations or the boundaries of zoning regulations cannot be upheld unless this requirement is met. The basic purpose in requiring conformity with a comprehensive plan is to prevent the arbitrary, unreasonable, and discriminatory exercise of the zoning power. And then it goes on at the bottom of page 63 of the excerpt, the requirement of conformity to a comprehensive plan serves as an effective brake upon spot zoning. This is in addition to the requirement that the proposed change be reasonably related to the police power pursuant to or in Section 8-2. The comprehensive plan concept provides some check on abuses of agency power for both zone changes and variances. Unlike the plan of development, which is always subject to quick changes, the scheme of development in the community, as shown by existing uses, together with the zoning regulations and map, provides stability and consistency of treatment of land in the municipality and is more likely to reflect community interests. So the point is, it must conform to the master plan. I then provide you with Section 8-3 of the Connecticut General Statutes, and in 8-3B, it says, in making its decision, the Commission shall take into consideration the plan of conservation and development prepared pursuant to Section 8-23 and shall state on the record its findings on consistency of the proposed establishment, change, or repeal of such regulations and boundaries within such plan. And I would submit that that simply cannot be done based on the state of our current master plan, which appropriately does not provide for developments of this kind in Greenfield Hill, Hoydens Hill, or Samp Mortar.
Hold on 1 second so we can change the tape. too? You guys want a break?
Yeah, why don't we take?
We're going to stand in recess for 2 minutes, if we may, Mr. Green.
Okay, so again, referring to the Hi-Ho field card, which is the next document, you'll see the relative size of this development to that. Again, it's twice the size of, well, again, depending on how you look at this project. It's also, including the parking garage, approximately 5 times the size of the IGA, to give you some notion of that scale. And obviously, we just finished the appeal involving the IGA and the Walgreens application, and certainly that involved a significant amount of time interpreting the neighborhood design business district regulations and the fact that they really are truly designed for uses that are for the convenience of the local neighborhood and to be used by the local neighborhood. And clearly, this application, and I was struck by the fact that the applicant really plainly has said that this facility would be used by people from everywhere, basically, and a significant amount of the traffic comes off the Merritt Parkway and comes from other parts of town. And frankly, the way, I mean, even my own experience has been that when my daughter has to go to the pediatrician, we frequently have to go out of town to go to that particular office or whatever it's going to be. And this is not a use. Clearly, 35,000 feet of medical use is not something that the immediate neighborhood needs. So it is not an appropriate use in a neighborhood design business district. And again, there's no need to relax this design standard and this theme and this policy that has both been upheld by the Supreme Court and one that this commission has upheld for the benefit of a single development, for the benefit of a single developer, and particularly in this instance. And we urge you not to exercise your planning function in that way. Clearly, the text amendment is troubling, and as some of the speakers had mentioned, as you erode the sort of hard standards in your application, you erode the confidence of the public in understanding what those zoning regulations stand for. And it involves, it would result in all kinds of applications coming forward as applicants want to test whether the parking should be in the front or the parking should be in the back, where clearly this policy was established that established where parking should be on a site in a neighborhood design business district. And somehow I think to just really water down, to erode that is, I think, imprudent and really, again, serves to weaken our regulations. I'd like to now talk to you about the nuts and bolts of the application a little bit and on the special permit. And I think there are some fundamental defects in terms of how this application unfolded. I guess the first question I have through you, Mr. Chairman, is the applicant was not clear on the state of the title. And as I understand it, Parcel A, Title II Parcel A is presently held by Fairfield Gateway LLC, whereas the balance of the property and what is Parcel B is presently owned by New Way Associates LLC. And I just don't know whether that's clear in the record, and I'm wondering if the applicant can.
That is not correct. The record should indicate, as I think the application does, John Fallon for the record. The owner of the entire parcel, A and B, is New Way Associates. Fairfield Gateway is the contract purchaser, has a contract subject to zoning to purchase Parcel A, which would be the piece where the medical office would be.
Okay, and I'm wondering if the 500-foot map is.
All right, there's been a map submitted, and I'm sorry. There it is. And
would you like it?
I think each member of the commission has it, so I'll just refer to it and what the specific issue is.
And just so we're clear on the record, that what we have before us are three items. One is an application of New Way Associates to establish a neighborhood design district on land that's presently AAA. The second is an application of New Way Associates to amend Section 1210(3)(2) of the regs. And the third is the special permit of Fairfield Gateway pertaining to the construction of a building on the site.
And just referring the commission, I provided you with the document entitled, it refers to a portion of the regulation, Section 25, Special Permits in Design Districts, and I need to refer to those regulations in this passage. And specifically, on page 87, and I'm referring to Section 25.8.1.2, so it's 25.8.1.2 of the regulation. It requires that the applicant submit 10 copies of a map showing the subject property and all streets, properties, and owners within 500 feet of the subject property in the standard key color in use on the town zoning maps. And it suggests, again, that you have to show a swath of basically 500 feet around the property, and I would submit that the applicant has provided a 500-foot swath around both parcel A and parcel B, while the zone change really only applies to parcel A. Therefore, the applicant has provided a larger 500-foot radius than is required under your regulations. Now, you might say, well, that's a good thing, because it identifies a larger area, it shows a larger area, it provides more information than is required, but actually that is problematical, because referring back to Section 8-3 of the zoning regulations, there is an opportunity to file what's known as a protest against a zoning regulation. And what it says is, in Section 8-3B, if a protest against a proposed change is filed at or before a hearing with the Zoning Commission, signed by the owners of 20% or more of the area of the lots included in such proposed change, or of the lots within 500 feet in all directions of the property included in the proposed change, such change shall not be adopted except by a vote of 2/3 of all members, so it requires more of a supermajority. By showing a larger area, however, it created a larger burden on someone who might want to create a protest petition, because it showed a much larger area and more property. So I would suggest that it prejudiced anyone who looked at the map and said, wow, this is a much larger area. I don't have the time, the inclination, or the resources to cover this much larger area, which it would be, because obviously parcel A is much smaller and the 500-foot area around it would be significantly smaller. The applicant may argue that the entire piece is invoked, but I would suggest that that's not the portion of the property subject to the zone change. I'm sure Attorney Fallon will raise that in rebuttal. But another significant issue is in Section 25 is bear with me. On page 87 again, 25.8.1.4 on page 87 says stamped envelopes. It says stamped envelopes addressed to each of the owners as of the date of the application of all properties which are subject to the application and all properties within 500 feet of any portion of such properties. And when I made inquiry of the zoning department, I was provided with a list of the envelopes that were provided by the applicant, and in fact, the applicant only provided envelopes to owners within 200 feet of 4185 Black Rock Turnpike and not 500 feet as required. And I provided you with the list that I was provided by the zoning department of the envelopes that were sent out. I would suggest that Connecticut case law provides that this renders the application defective and affects the jurisdiction of this commission to grant a zone change in this instance where the notice is inadequate. Section 8-7 of the Connecticut General Statutes provides the minimum requirements for notice for a zone change on hearings and decisions, but it provides in the center of Section 8-7D, it says, in addition to such notice, such commission, board, or agency may, by regulation, provide for additional notice, and that's what happened here in Fairfield. Provided an additional notice being envelopes to owners within 500 feet. I would suggest that the commission therefore lacks jurisdiction to grant the zone change that is permitted, that is requested.
You're indicating that, in fact, the application does not comply with 25814 and that there were envelopes only as to the homes within 200 feet?
Correct.
And then the document I think you're referring to is a single sheet of paper labeled owners within 200 feet?
Yes.
Is something you compiled, or what?
No,
what
it
is?
was provided to me by Mr. Wendt when I made inquiry as to who was provided with notice.
So this was something provided by the applicant then?
It was provided by the zoning department.
By the zoning
Well,
department.
by the zoning department to you, but was it, the applicant provided it to you?
I'm just trying to establish on the record, this is a document not that the staff created, but in fact the applicant.
I believe the applicant provided it to Mr. Wendt. Is that Mr. Wendt? Nodding in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. Green. I just want to clarify that for the record.
All right. Moving on to the site plan and section 25.7.1, which is one of the standards for approval of a application. And it provides uh, 25.7.1 says the proposed use shall be a permitted use in the district in which it is to be located. Again, I would suggest that this is not a permitted use by virtue of the fact that there's nothing in this record that suggests that it is, again, a use that is proposed primarily for use by the local neighborhood to serve and provide convenience goods or services to the local neighborhood, so it doesn't conform to that. More significantly, I want to refer the commission, and I have an excerpt from section 12.7.6, setbacks. And that's with the materials that I provided to the commission this evening. And the third page of that piece has the grid that the applicant submitted with their drawings. And it deals with setback from rear property line. It shows the minimum required, maximum allowed is minimum required is 10 feet. It shows the existing condition to be 87 feet. And it shows that the proposed condition, the building that the applicant proposes to build, would be 27.8 feet from the rear property line. However, I think that the applicant failed to read or take into account section, well, you can refer to the rear property line setback in 12.7.6.3, which is on the first page of the document I provided you, and that says rear property line setbacks are 10 feet. So that would seem to be okay, but then you move on to the next section, and it refers to adjacent residence district boundary. And what's happened here is the applicant proposes to create this zone change, which would turn Parcel A entirely into a neighborhood design business district, which borders on a residence AAA district. It says setback shall be 10 feet or the same as that of the adjacent residence district setback requirement, whichever is greater. And on the next page, you'll see that in a residence AAA, the rear property line requirement is 50 feet, or the sideline is 30 feet. In either event, the building that is proposed doesn't comply with that regulation. And clearly, the design of that regulation was that where commercial properties border on residential properties, you don't have, for example, in a neighborhood design business district, in some instances, or in some of the commercial districts, there's a zero setback requirement. So what you don't want is on the border of a residence district, a building that's built right on the property line and some poor resident living there. And so it was clearly to create that kind of space and quality of life and all the good things that come from having some space between structures. And the applicant did not take that into account in designing their building, so it's not zoning compliant in that regard. Next. Yeah.
How do you feel the 12.7.6.6 interplays with 12.7.6.4? Because the building is higher than 30 feet, right?
Well, I think the applicant says the building's 29 feet 6 inches.
29 feet 6?
I think they do.
Okay.
My understanding is they say the height of the building. I looked at that. They say that the height of the building is 29.3. Maximum height for building proposed is 29.3. So I guess it's 29 feet 3 inches.
Thank you.
So anyways, the point is the building is too close to the rear property line. You know, the restrictive covenant even talks in terms of creating homes. It's clearly conceived that it would be bordering on a residence AAA. So I would suggest that that site plan can't be approved on that basis. Standards for landscaping and parking, you know, we get into this issue 25.7.4. Talks about the standards for parking and your approval of sort of the specifications for construction of improvements with any existing or proposed local or private street, and they talk about driveways, off-street parking and loading spaces, storm drainage, and 12.6 says in neighborhood design business district, off-street parking and loading shall be provided in accordance with section 28. And the point is we get into that issue again that we've gotten into with past applications, where I note that one of the parking garages, in the primary parking garage, the entry into the garage, the height is 8 feet or less into the parking garage. And I'm not sure, again, that's only 8 feet. This would be the height. We've had discussions with other projects that emergency vehicles of the town are taller than 8 feet. Therefore, they could not, I guess, in theory, enter the larger parking garage if someone had an emergency, a fire, or whatever. They would have to park outside the site. And I'm not sure that's appropriate or wise for the commission to accept in a site plan. And perhaps that's something I note that the regulations don't speak specifically in terms of heights of openings of parking garages, and maybe that's something for the commission to think about in future amendments of the regulations, is creating minimum heights and that sort of thing. But I would certainly recommend against approving a parking garage with such a low entry for the reasons that we've talked about. Your regulations say in 28.10.1 and 12.6.2.1, I think I provided those, that in both of those regulations it says that the facade, and I'm sorry to ramble on here, but it's just some of these nuts and bolts issues. 12.6 .2.1 says, off-street parking or loading areas which extend under all or portion of a building or other structure more than 10 feet shall be enclosed. The facade of this enclosure shall be the same as the building or structure above it. I know, and I can't assess the architectural detail, and I appreciate the thought that went into it to make it consistent with the Merritt Parkway Bridge, if it is. I haven't studied that. But the point is, in two places in your regulations, again in 12.6.2.1 and in 28.10.1 of your regulations, you require that the facade, that underground parking facade be consistent with the facade of the building. And I'm not sure what the design motive was there, but that's what your regulations require. I'm not sure, my clients have made reference to the metal bars and the grid as not being attractive, appropriate, or sort of consistent with the design. But again, I leave that to you, but I just raised that. So 25.7.7 talks about the standards, and it says that the development shown on the site and architectural plans shall be of such a character as to harmonize with the neighborhood. Well, obviously, putting a 55,000 square foot office building on a site where there is none doesn't harmonize with the neighborhood, and again, it's twice the size of the hi-ho across the street. Certainly, it can't be argued that it accomplishes a transition in character between areas of unlike character, because really it encroaches greatly into the residential area. There was nothing offered by the applicant to meet their burden that it protected property values in the neighborhood. There was nothing offered on that. I don't think that there's any basis upon which this commission can find what the impact would be on property values in Fairfield, although there was some discussion by the public on that and impact on property values. But I don't think there's any basis upon which this commission can make that finding. To preserve and enhance the appearance and beauty of the community, again, that's a rather subjective standard. I leave that to the commission, but I would suggest that the appearance of the plan is not consistent with your zoning regulations. To avoid undue traffic congestion, and I think Mr. Galanti does a terrific job, but I'm not sure at the end of the day that the parameters that he worked with were truly reflective of the use of this site, in the sense that I think he made reference to the fact that the site would only be used. I think he at one point referenced that it would be closed at 5 o'clock or 5:30. I'm not sure that that's a limitation that the applicant, in one of his remarks, he suggested that office buildings or medical buildings close at 5 o'clock. I would suggest that in my experience with my kids and my family, that's not the case. I think there is some uncertainty as to where employees, where potential users of the site come from. I would suggest that I would urge, your experience in terms of medical uses and 35,000 feet of medical uses, and I'm not sure that there was a strong foundation created for the assumptions that were made in terms of the level of use. The applicant didn't offer any information on medical uses or provide any sort of expert basis from which this commission could determine the true load and true burden on the number of cars, number of people coming and going, hours, and what that all means in terms of cars entering and leaving the site. And there seemed to be some very blanket assumptions made. I've got to address just a few more things, but I just want to talk about the argument on affordable housing and the suggestion that sort of grew out and started as you're going to lose control of this site, and this commission quite appropriately asked questions of Attorney Fallon as to what that meant, and I sort of had a notion of what it meant right away, and clearly there was this, I'm not going to call it a threat, but this suggestion or whatever, take it as you wish. It was put out there that if you don't approve this, there's a real and genuine risk that there could be an affordable plan, or you'll lose control of this site, and that the developers have been calling for 4 years. And let me say this. There is no question, and this commission recognized in dealing with the Commerce Drive area, that there is a need in Fairfield for a more varied and diverse inventory of housing opportunities of all kinds, We need, and that was clearly contemplated by this commission in the regulations that you adopted at Commerce Drive to promote that. We need more housing options to suit a whole variety of our population. And I know that, and I know that from my work with Operation Hope. Frankly, I'm on the advisory board of Operation Hope with Attorney Fallon. I know he recognizes that as well. And my point is that this is not the forum, and this is not the moment, and on this application, I'm not prepared to address whether or not and where those sorts of opportunities and options should be created. I question whether it's on this site, and I don't suggest that it's on this site. And really, that is a discussion for another day. And, but I can say that in my experience, this is the first time that I've ever heard an applicant come before the commission in support of their plan and suggest that if you didn't accept their plan or adopt their plan, and they put it out there, that there is this risk. And I think it is a bad policy. I think it's a terrible policy. And I would urge the commission to disregard those sorts of comments and create a policy that we are not going to be influenced, pressured, or change the way we assess these applications based on those kinds of statements. And I think that is an important policy that you establish with this application, that going forward, because this is the first time I've ever heard it in this town, and I don't want this to become a practice of every applicant who needs a little bit of leverage to start saying, if you don't do this, you get that. And I think as a policy, as a clear policy, this commission must say, we are not going to consider those kinds of comments. They are not relevant. They do not apply to how we consider and decide these applications, and we're not going to be pressured and we're not going to be pushed on that basis. And when the appropriate time comes, that dialogue will be had. But again, with respect to this application, I urge you to create that precedent. Again, I received a number of emails, and unfortunately, I received 26 emails from Greenfield Hill Village, which I did not produce today as a little result of some confusion, but they were all in opposition, and again, it doesn't really matter, but I thought I'd mention that for the satisfaction of my client, who might be disappointed that I didn't bring them. But you'll hear rebuttal now from Attorney Fallon, and he's going to rebut much of what I said. And as I said earlier, I urge you to review the master plan, to look at your regulations, and I also want to submit this for your thought. Rebuttal is not an opportunity to provide information that was not provided initially before this commission. This is a hearing. It's not a workshop. So, and the rules of fundamental fairness govern the actions of this commission. And fairness is that the applicant states their case. The public has an opportunity to respond as we are responding. And if we are wrong, then the applicant can point to the materials that are in the record in this case, point to the regulations, the master plan, the case law, and so forth. But this is not an opportunity, for example, to provide the information on value or impact on property values and other elements that were missing from the applicant's plan. Again, it's not about how the lawyers characterize this. It's what your master plan says, your plan of conservation and development, what your regulations say, and what the case law says. I'm happy to answer any questions that the Commission has at this time.
Is there any final member of the public who wishes to comment briefly? Hearing none, we'll go to Mr. Fallon for his.
Mr. Richter can be considered part of the rebuttal, because he just wants to speak to the material submitted by Mr. Green with regard to medical office vacancy in town, and then I'll have a final proposed site.
Real estate. Are you representing the applicant?
Well, Mr. Richter is,
The applicant.
he's the
Part-
managing
Member of the LLC?
Both LLCs.
That's,
right.
yes, that's fine, yes.
My name is Paul Richter. I live on Springer Road. I grew up about 1.5 miles from this property. Springer Road is perhaps a half mile from the property as the crow flies, and I run a real estate business on Black Rock Turnpike about 1.5 miles south of the property. You know, my job has been to find a development proposal that's acceptable, that would enable the property to be sold so that Paul and Ted Dudick, who have run the plant factory for 35 years, can retire and move on. Yes, I have a financial interest in the project, but I also have a great personal interest because in seeing something positive happen here, because it will directly impact both my neighborhood and my livelihood. You know, in the past few years, I've been down to the town hall with several development proposals, and after having heard all of the feedback, we believe the application before you represents the best solution to the property. We've tried very hard to address the needs of the community. I think hiring Jack Franzen, who is not only a noted architect but also a neighborhood resident, speaks to that, and we knew that based on the work he had done downtown for the Clevebands, that he would create a building that we would be proud of, and I think he's done that. About a year ago, with the site plan and a building sketch in hand, I set out to meet with all of the neighbors, and I did speak with them all, met with many of them as recently as this past Saturday, where some of the questions that came up were discussed, including a turning lane into the property from Black Rock Turnpike on the north, heading north. We even actually withheld our application in the summer so that the Merritt Parkway Conservancy landscape architect could meet with our landscape architect to come up with a lot of the site plan revisions that we agreed to incorporate into the plan, including the planting of 10 oak trees and establishment of planting islands in the parking lot, and as well as, and perhaps most importantly, the deed restriction on the balance of the property. And that, to me, allows you to vote on not just this corner, but the entire property, and will quiet any disruption in property value, because the thing that, based on my 28 years of experience in real estate, that harms property values most is uncertainty. With this property resolved, with no more than 5 single-family houses able to be built on the upper portion, the question of uncertainty is removed from anybody who is selling in Greenfield Hunt, as well as anybody in the neighborhood on Black Rock Turnpike. In relation to, I think, Commissioner Jacobs, you had the question last week about the availability of medical space. The LoopNet is the commercial multiple listing service. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. I ran a very simple search, Fairfield Medical Office. I got 5 results, and I will submit that to the commission here. Actually, 2 of those properties, 2 of those are in the same building. So the largest of them being 6,000 foot, the smallest being 560 feet. So if I could submit that, this is from LoopNet. So although I have no doubt there's a lot of office space available, these are the properties that the owners or brokers of those properties have considered to be medical. They put them out there as medical and have offered them to doctors. The other piece of information I would like to submit is an article from the Connecticut Post in July 12th of 2011. It was written because Commerce Park in Bridgeport was put on the market by Dr. Russo, and there was a quote that I think is appropriate. It goes, if there is any area or sector from a construction point of view that has activity, it is hospital/healthcare, said William Cianci, Executive Director of the Connecticut Construction Institute, adding that includes renovating existing space and creating additions. So I think we know for a fact, based on the interest that we've received thus far, that there is interest and need on the part of practices to be here, and I think this article bears that out. So I'd like to submit that as well. So So as I said, you have a proposal before you that incorporates, that's received an enormous amount of input. It incorporates a lot of that input into the plan, most importantly in the form of that deed restriction, and allows the commission the opportunity to resolve the question of the entire property, which is why I would ask that it be approved. Thank you.
For the record, has Mr. Green seen a copy of this document that's been submitted, the LoopNet listing of real estate?
I have.
What we'll do is, I'll pass it around to staff and have a copy shown to Mr. Green. And since this is new evidence, I'm going to give Mr. Green the opportunity to, I think I have to keep the record clean, to offer any additional comment on this, because this
Why don't
is...
if we could do that now, that would be fine, rather than, I'm happy to allow it.
Yeah, we'll pass it around to staff and show it to Mr. Green.
They stamp it first.
And what I'll do is I'm going to take a several-minute recess so Mr. Green can take a look at that. And here, so we're going to stand in recess briefly so Mr. Green can take a look at that document.
I reviewed the list of 5 properties. I know one of them doesn't have a street address. I don't know. I note that it looks like the other 3 are included in the list that I provided, so I have no particular comment on it.
Thank you.
I like mine better, I guess.
You liked your proposed stipulation better, too, than the one he drafted.
I should say for the record that the differences in the 2 proposed stipulations are cosmetic. They don't change the substance. I'll get into that a little bit. His was better formatted.
That's what I understand. He knows how to change font for captions.
Well, good evening. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but I have a fair amount that I want to cover here. And I will, as always, start with my colleague and friend, Mr. Green. And I'll start with the technical points he raises, and then I'll move on to some of the more substantive points, some of which are a little redundant to what some of the other folks had to say. First of all, let's talk about his comments with regard to 25. Let's get over on here. 25.8.1.2, and that is the provision that talks about 10 copies of a map showing the subject property and all streets, properties, and owners within 500 feet of the subject property of the subject property. I submit to you the subject property is the entire parcel. This map, which I'll be referring to in a minute, shows a lot line revision, and it shows a parcel A and B that we've been talking about a lot. That map's not been recorded yet. Makes no sense to record the map till you act. So the entire parcel, or to use the language of your regulations, of the subject property, I submit to you, is the subject property. So the map does, in fact, properly show the area within 500 feet of the subject property. And really, that is not a disadvantage to anybody who wanted to petition. But, of course, if you consider the layout here within 500 feet, nobody could sign a valid protest petition here unless Greenfield Hunt did. Because the petition, in order to be effective, has to say that the owners of 20% of the property within 500 feet, not the owners of 20% of the property, not 20% of the owners. So the bottom line is, on that particular issue, it's clear that that is correct. The stamped envelopes. Okay. You basically have submitted to you, and it was submitted to staff, owners within 200 feet. That's what it says. It does say that. I submit to you that when you look, it's probably almost certainly, again, based upon the Greenfield Hunt influence, this encompasses everybody within 500 feet. Okay? That's number one. Number two, the provisions for statutory notice here, as Mr. Green indicates and admits to, have been complied with. Statutory notice is what is required in order for you to have jurisdiction. Even though you have the rights in the regulations in your regulations to ascribe other aspects of notice. It is by way of jurisdiction, the statute. Even though I think the list that you received and that the staff certified actually encompasses owners within 500 feet, because Greenfield Hunt, if you look at the map, comprises substantially all of it. The case law is also clear that a defect in notice can only be raised by a person who claims to have been not notified. Hey, I should have been notified and I wasn't. Can't be raised by Mr. Green, can't be raised by any of his clients. It would have to be raised by somebody now or later coming in and saying, well, I didn't get proper notice and I was supposed to. I don't think that's the case here. And the other cases also say that if, in fact, people show up at a hearing, be it through an association like Greenfield Hunt or individually, then at the public hearing, then that is deemed to be waived. So the notice requirement and the envelope requirement is also specious. Now, let's talk about the other technical issue here, Section 12.7.6.4, and that's the issue that Mr. Green points out with regard to the setback. He's correct. I'd submit to you, if you look at this map, this is a side yard. Based upon the regulations that he points out, the side yard should be 30 feet. Based upon the map you have, it's 27.8 feet. Not an issue. Why? This map has not been recorded, as I said to you. There is no parcel A and parcel B right now. Map hasn't been recorded, and it won't be until or unless you approve this. This quote-unquote defect, which is not a jurisdictional defect, can simply be remedied, and I'm going to leave this with you. You can't probably see it very well, but Mr. Jobst has shown here how we could, when we file this map, move this lot line over, not change the zone would be the same, but move the lot line between parcel A and parcel B in this side yard 2.2 feet. So what you would simply have, you would then have the building 30 feet from the residential property line, whereas that small sliver, we're not asking you to push the zone further. It could just be a piece of property, all of parcel A. This would all be design, neighborhood design. This little strip would be residence AAA.
Mr. Wagner? Attorney Green actually said 50 feet.
Well, I disagree with Attorney Green, because I don't think this is a rear yard, I think it's a side yard.
Okay.
And if it's a side yard, it's 30, but and I strongly disagree. But you know something? If it was 50 feet, you could do the same thing.
Well,
if the commission were determined that this was a rear yard,
right,
and therefore this building should be set back 50 feet, we could do the same thing. We wouldn't change or ask you to change the zone line from what's been noticed. We would simply, when this map would be filed, we would file it with a lot line for parcel B that would accommodate a 50-foot setback. Now, I think it should be 30 feet, but either way, the point is, this line here is not a line that actually currently divides these parcels. It's a proposed line, and it would only be, this map creating these two parcels would only be put on the record if you approve these applications.
Okay, so it's your position then that on the, is that north up? North is up?
This is south, this is north.
Okay,
North
so
is
that so it's your position then that the
west and east.
The top line on the south is a rear line?
This would be a rear line. In my
Rear
opinion.
line.
Yes.
Then coming down is a side?
In my opinion.
Okay, and then the one then coming across?
Side?
No, go to the right.
Okay.
You have your pointer? I want to clearly understand what their position is. So, this is a rear line? This is a side?
Correct.
This is a rear? Is this a rear or a side?
I would think that's a rear.
Okay. Is this a rear or a side?
I would think that would be a rear also.
Okay.
Right.
What is the distinction then between this lot line and this lot line being one as a side and one as a rear.
Mr. Chairman, we can help with this.
There's a
Yes.
definition.
Thanks. I'm asking because I don't know. You know.
It is open to your testimony.
Mr. Wendt.
Jim Wendt, Assistant Planning Director for the record. The section that is being discussed is relative to the residential setback, not to the commercial side of the property line.
Okay.
So it would be relevant to how that property line relates to the residential property, not the commercial property. And 4, since this is would be effectively a rear lot if this property line is drawn, this entirety of the length of that meandering property line would be a side yard relative to the AAA zone property.
Okay. And so which would then be the front line? This curve here.
Well, this is a street line, all of it relative to the commercial piece. For the residential piece, its frontage here
Right.
would be its street line.
Street line.
All of this would be a side yard for this property. And so that the setback from the adjacent residence district is what is required, whatever this property would require, to the extent that it's greater than the 10 feet is what would hold.
And it's 30.
Right. For a side, it's 30. For a rear, it's 50.
It's 50.
Right.
Having established that it's a side yard, which Mr. Wendt has now confirmed, what I'm saying, so we're all clear, is if you take this dark black line and you measure it from the point of this building, Mr. Green's correct, it's 27.8 feet. It doesn't conform to the side yard. He correctly pointed that out. But that doesn't create any issue here because this is not a parcel that has yet been created. And if you think this is a good application, as I'm going to talk about in a minute, all we would need to do would be revise this lot line along this side here to add 2.2 feet. We're not asking you to change the zone from what was here and what's been noticed. This would simply be a parcel. It would be neighborhood design district with a small strip of residential property to its property line. And what you would then have is you'd have the building set back 30 feet from the property line itself.
Is that a
Mr. Parker.
buildable elevation at that point?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Okay.
it's a de minimis change. It's a de minimis change in the property line. Now, I know Mr. Green may be disappointed but I think I should have a chance. I mean, that's not new information. That's pure rebuttal.
That is new information. If we're revising lot lines, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think so. I think the commission can consider that. I think my point is that is not a defect to this application. You'll be the final arbiters of that.
Let me just ask you a question. As I read the regulations, 12.7.6 setbacks, it says no building, I think our commissioners are getting at this, no building or structure shall be closer to street or property lines or any resident district boundary than the following. So right now, you have a drawing that shows your distance from a residential district boundary of 27.8 feet.
Correct.
We can move the lot line all we want. Now, to move the lot line, as you suggest, would move the lot line further into the residential boundary. So you're still not 30 feet from a residential district boundary. You're still going to be 27.8 feet from the residential district boundary.
Correct, but that's how you would resolve the issue.
So the issue, I think, is with regard to the notice
What it says is,
of the change.
it says the setback shall be 10 feet or the same as the adjacent residential district setback requirement. I think that's a setback to the property line.
Nobody's arguing with you about that point. I think the issue that's being taken up is with your suggestion that you could easily cure the defect in the plan as currently submitted by redrawing that line.
The lot line.
Right, but I think what is being drawn out is that the application is for a zone change as drawn on these plans.
But we wouldn't be changing the zone from what we're asking you to do.
With regard to two plus feet, you would be increasing the area.
No.
Yeah.
It's the setback, with all due respect to the chairman, I apologize, but I have to come forward, this is important, is a setback of a building from a property line. We're in agreement on that.
It
No.
is not a setback to the...
No, we're not in agreement on
It's a
that.
setback to the property line.
Adjacent residential district boundary.
You are reading from?
12.7.6.
Point four.
Should be
Or .6 in general.
12.7.6. At the top, it says, "No building or structure shall be closer to street or property lines or any residence district boundary." So what I think Mr. Wagner is saying is that you can move the lot lines all you want, you're still 27.8 feet from a residential district boundary, which would exist if we passed your first application, which is to rezone it to neighborhood design business district.
Right.
That would still be AAA zone.
Because by moving the line, you would be increasing the area of the application for which you're asking for a zone change. And I think that is Attorney Green's point when he says it's new information. That's not what was noticed in the application.
Okay.
And if you have a response to that, we'll certainly be glad to hear it, but I think that's the point.
I understand. Let me consult with Mr. Wagner.
What is this? What is this? What is this? That's what we're doing.
It's your boundary.
I know, but it's good.
Yeah, there's just, you're asking, it's residential district boundary, we're not moving the boundary.
Right,
That's
right,
correct.
right,
That's
right,
correct.
right.
That's good.
That's the
We don't need
He might have a response. I don't know.
You need another minute, or whenever you're ready. You
No, I
tell us.
think what we would want to do, I understand what the commission is saying. This is a small corner of the building. So the question is, we could obviously revise the building to conform with that setback requirement without changing the zone. Now, the question is, can we do that and continue the hearing, or do you want to start all over this? I would suggest to you that we should and could submit a revised site plan, reducing the building size at that point, therefore not dealing with the lot line issue or the zone change issue, and continue the hearing for purposes of resolving that issue, so you can ultimately make a decision here on the merits.
That's your call.
Oh, thanks.
You know,
I mean, because the other option, I understand the point we're at,
So
the
you
other option
suggest-
is we're going to start this whole thing over
Yeah, I've got a
again.
bunch of staff. Well, I'm gonna, so you, just so I'm clear, that I'm gonna consult with my staff and director here. You're suggesting then by reducing the size of the building in this corner over here, I guess where you're 27.8 feet. This is, I'm sorry, I mean to,
Yeah, I'm suggesting...
you're suggesting cutting this corner or reducing
We
this?
would submit a revised site plan that would modify the building footprint so that it would conform to a 30-foot setback from the proposed zone line as currently proposed, so there'd be no change in that.
That's the only place.
And I've seen the commission before, and I'm not saying you have to do it here, but the commission has, in the past, from time to time, allowed revisions to a proposed site plan as part of a continued hearing, provided the hearing remained open for consideration. It just strikes me, to be very practical about it, on behalf of everybody here, that's a better way, because then you'll resolve that technical issue, and you can then decide this on the merits.
That is just for clarification, or, confirmation. That's the only part of the building that is less than 30 feet from the
Yes.
proposed boundary.
Correct. And it's 2.2 feet. So really, you're right, and I appreciate it pointed out. Mr. Green is correct. So the question, before I get into a big finish here, is how...
At least you're honest about it.
I am. How you want to proceed. We can resolve this 2.2-foot issue matter. I think propriety would dictate we'd have to submit a revised plan. The hearing could not be closed. I'd have to give you any extensions, which I might have to do because of my personal situation.
The public would have the right to,
Mr. Green would have the right to speak to whatever you chose to speak to, but then at least we could close out this hearing and be done and get a decision on the merits.
We need to take a brief recess because I need to discuss something with the staff. We have a number of issues regarding how to proceed here, which I want to discuss with the staff and the director, one of which is the impending election, which obviously impacts this commission and who is on it in a few more weeks.
To finish this by the
So
15th?
no, I'm going to stand a brief recess first. We're going to stand in a brief recess.
That's what we did, we're here tonight, and we're not, this isn't gonna rise and fall on a 2-foot table.
We're back on the record. I've just had a brief discussion with staff on some procedural issues. What I intend to do is continue to proceed with this hearing as we've begun. Should the applicant decide that for some reason he needs to resubmit a drawing or a portion of his application, that's his prerogative to do that. If he were to resubmit a drawing for a different building with different setbacks, for instance, we'd have to go to public comment all over again on this issue because that's different. The applicant can, some of my fellow commissioners have raised an issue through questioning, as you can see, as to a portion of this application. It's the applicant's call. If he wishes for us to proceed with the record as he has with the drawings that he has submitted, we can do that. We have 3 different items on the agenda. When it comes to voting, we can address each of them and the issues as we see on those and based upon the responses we've received. So it's really you, Mr. Fallon, how you'd like us to proceed at this
Well, I
point.
think I'd like to proceed because I think that, as I said at the outset, in the interest of everyone's time, not to mention this volunteer commission who's not getting paid to be here tonight, I think it makes sense. You've heard a lot. You spent 2 nights on this. There are fundamental issues here which I want to address about the zone change and the regulation change. And if you find and you're ultimately persuaded, as I'll discuss in a minute, that it is appropriate to grant those applications, then I think you have a number of options with regard to the site plan, either with regard to a conditional approval or a requirement that a site plan application be resubmitted. But then we'd be talking about, a building on a lot that was an approved use. So I would be comfortable proceeding.
So to my colleagues, what Mr. Fallon is saying is we have 3 different applications. We cannot get to number 3, which is the special permit application, unless and until we approve number 1 and number 2, a new design zone change and an amendment of our regulations. If we don't approve the zone change and the amendment to our regulations, we can't get to number 3. Should we
Well, it
approve
fails
number
as a
1?
matter of law.
It fails as, right, it would fail as a matter of law. If we do approve number 1 and 2, we have to decide what we do with number 3. We can approve the zone change, the regulation change, and reject this application, this special permit. We can condition it, I suppose, on having different plans submitted and then go to a hearing on those. So that Mr. Fallon's asking us just to proceed with the record and the building as drawn, which we can do. I mean, it's his application.
Because I have, and without being presumptive about it, because I have talked to Mr. Jobs, and there would be absolutely no problem, as you might imagine, since we're talking about 2.3 feet, curing that issue with regard to the side yard setback. I agree with the chair that a submission, you could make a condition of approval, submission of a revised plan, and that would have to be subject to a hearing, but that would be a much narrower focused hearing, it seems to me, than what we've been going through so far. So. All right, so let me address a few things with regard to that. This is not a major point, but I did in the last hearing when I think it was Commissioner Jacobs who might have asked, and I don't want to belabor it because it's not an ultimate linchpin of the application, but I do think you can very much consider, in the context of your planning function, economic considerations. You've heard a lot tonight, and you'll hear more about the Plan of Conservation and Development. But among your planning goals in the Plan of Conservation and Development, Section 3.10.1 is, quote, to encourage economic development that provides jobs and services for our population. So I think if you're talking about a zone change, you can certainly look at the matter of economic impacts. It's not controlling, but it certainly, I think, is relevant to the considerations. As far as the comments tonight, and I might as well take them in the order, I guess, there was an objection that you have by letter from Sasquatch, and I believe Ms. Stokes also spoke to as well, and that was with regard to the amendment. Again, let's remember that what the amendment proposed here does is simply ask you to give yourselves the same discretion with regard to design standards that you have currently in your zoning regulations throughout. And indeed, as I pointed out the other evening, the very language that I chose, the Commission may adjust the aforesaid requirements to particular circumstances of lot lines, topography, soil conditions, and site design while preserving the purpose and intent of the regulations, that goes and comes directly from other sections of your regulations that I have referred you to before, Section 12.10.3, Section 28.10, where you do in fact provide yourselves with the discretion to vary design requirements. And with all due respect to Ms. Stokes and also the association, I disagree strongly with her comments that this is some end run to avoid a variance. Variances are to be avoided. It is not good planning, and you are a planning and zoning commission, to have zoning done by variances. You should maintain that authority. And it should not be up to the Zoning Board of Appeals, generally speaking, when to vary design standards of your regulations as it relates to things like parking. Now, in this particular instance, as I said, the only reason that we are doing this is twofold. Excuse me. We were asked early on in our discussions with Greenfield Hill Village and others to seek a zone change of neighborhood design district, even though the property across the street is design commercial district. We did that to accommodate their desires to have the less intensive, more limited neighborhood design district uses than in the design commercial district. If we were forced to not put any of the parking where we want to put it, that would render the building, which it is not now, more obtrusive. And we simply are asking you to give yourselves on this particular design issue, which is fairly recent, the same discretion that you gave yourselves in other aspects of that same regulation when you adopted it. Indeed, when I first read this, I was under the impression, well, was that maybe a misprint? Did they mean to say, shall not? Because I think when you wrote up those design standards, you were trying to maintain flexibility and keeping that flexibility and the authority for that flexibility in your own hands. You didn't want to send off the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant variances of that section. So all I'm suggesting here is that you do that now. That doesn't create any precedence whatsoever, and it's absolutely consistent with what you've done in the past. Mr. Thompson made a few comments. The reference where doctor's offices... Yes, Mr. White. Mm-hmm.
Is there any sort of history or record of requests for variances from that regulation that you're asking?
Not that I'm aware of, and I don't think it's been around very long. I mean, I think that's a fairly new regulation that you adopted when you were doing your overall design standards and whatnot. But to answer your question, I'm not aware of any. But the fundamental point is, I don't think it's good for this commission, nor do I think it's good planning, for you not to maintain discretion over design requirements. You want to have that authority.
No, and I understand your argument to analogize, to other sections, but I didn't know if it was coming from some historical need.
No.
And doesn't any application for a variance have to be based on hardship
Right.
of the land?
Correct.
So I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, no, because I'm not asking you to sit as a zoning board of appeals. I'm simply asking you to give yourself the same discretion based on the same language that you give yourself in this very same section of the other this regulation in dealing with other factors. That's all. When you set up this design district and you set these standards for this design district, you gave yourself flexibility in a number of different areas relative to allowance for not imposing that strictly when the language I use, topography, soil conditions, site, while preserving the purpose and intent of the regulation. I'm not asking you to do anything new here, but I think, in a lot of towns, there's sometimes a turf war, if you will, between the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals, because the Planning and Zoning Commission says we adopt a regulation, and then the Zoning Board of Appeals goes and says, oh, they waive it. Well, and that's not good planning. So I'm suggesting to you, you keep the authority, especially in these design districts and these design standards, for yourself. And it sets no precedent for anything. You can impose it or not when you see fit. Mr. Thompson's comments, doctors' offices as creatures in our zoning regulations are found in the terminology business and professional office. Section 12.5.2 allows business and professional offices. That's the same language that's used in Section 12.4.3. Also misplaced is the reference to the 4,000-foot limitation. As you all well know, that all grew out of the whole Walgreens thing, the formula store. When you look at Section 12.5, you limited certain retail uses, and banks too, I think, to 4,000 square feet or less. You did not limit business and professional offices. The lighting plan conforms to all your requirements of the regulations. It is unobtrusive. Mr. Petrillo had some comments. His concerns were basically referencing two things, as I remember them. One, he had concerns with regard to the impact on the Merritt Parkway as a visual matter. Well, we stand before you, as Mr. Green said. The Merritt Parkway Conservancy, whether they're here not supporting, not opposing, they've entered into an agreement with us. And you have a copy of that in the form of the restrictive covenant. They are not opposing this application because they are satisfied that what we are proposing, the nature of Jack's design, and the other standards that we've placed in there protect the interests of the Merritt Parkway. His second concern, and a few other speakers, was about existing traffic, okay? It's understood. As Mr. Galante testified to, there is existing traffic. Mr. Kennelly was able to talk about some of his experiences. We recognize that. We're not saying there's not a lot of traffic up there. What we are saying, however, is that based upon his testimony, which again was not controverted by any other expert testimony, the increase during peak hours is 110 cars, and that increase in peak hours will not change the levels of service. This has been reviewed by DOT. There has certainly been all input from the DOT. Actually, they like very much getting rid of the house and that strange little driveway out into the middle of the entrance. But on the issue of parking, you have a situation where, when it comes to traffic, yes, there's a lot of traffic there. And yes, a medical office, as I think Mr. Bielik or somebody wrote a letter to, yes, is active during the day. We're not disputing any of that. But what we're saying is if you look at the peak hours, what you do have is 110 vehicular trips, and that doesn't change the levels of service.
Mr. Fallon, Commissioner Alessi had a question.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Fallon, according to Mr. Galante's plan, does he have an idea of how many cars we expect per day, or vehicles per day?
The answer is no. He calculated based upon peak trips.
We have received a letter that was entered into record, I'm sure you have it, from Dr. Bursick.
Right.
Who's guesstimating at 80% occupancy, or we're getting 400 cars a day, and at total capacity, we're looking at 600.
I reviewed that letter with Mr. Galante. We wouldn't dispute that. But the standard of traffic measurement that would apply is what are the impacts of that traffic in terms of levels of service. And the way you analyze impacts on a worst case scenario is you look at the peak hours. And in this particular instance, we assumed that traffic. We indicated, I think very conservatively, that it would be 110 vehicle trips a day during peak hours. And then we extrapolated in that whole report that Mr. Galante did what impact that has on your levels of service. So I don't dispute anything that's in the doctor's letter. There'll probably be 400 to 600 extra vehicles a day spread out over the course of a whole day, or as he points out in his article or in his letter, even into the evening. But at the end of the day, the traffic analysis that we did is in the form you would expect. We take a worst-case scenario during the worst times on the road, the peak hours, and then we extrapolate that traffic and tell you what's going to happen in the worst-case scenario to your levels of service.
agreeing with those numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
They don't change the levels of service. Now, back to some comments by Mr. Green. Again, I think it's at least worthwhile historically to point out that the property across the street is in the design commercial district, the hotel and bar. We have kept the zoning on this side of the street in the neighborhood design district because that's what the neighbors asked us to do. The policies and objectives of Section 12.5, which he referred to, I think are supportive of this particular application. The purpose of this district, as he wrote to you, is to provide local neighborhoods with needed and desirable services in a manner which will not be detrimental to the surrounding residential area. Well, if there's ever a clearer example of that, this is a desirable service for this neighborhood and others, and I submit to you it's not going to be detrimental to the area. He points out that it's a smaller area that is currently zoned in the design, the neighborhood design district. If I ever use the word of a massive strip center, I apologize, because I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting to you, without being derogatory about any other developments, is what this particular property would facilitate in its current zone is the kind of small little strip center that we have, I think, more than enough of on Black Rock Turnpike, where there might be a deli, there might be a nail salon, there might be a pizza place, there might be a lot of things, okay? And I don't believe, and I don't think the majority of the local neighbors believe, that that's either going to be aesthetically attractive, nor do I think it's going to have a better impact in terms of traffic, because there, especially in conjunction with the bar and restaurant, the activity, it'll become a real strip center. So let's be clear, it is small, but it's not. It's so small that if the zone is not changed, it's not going to yield any kind of development that is attractive or in keeping, as we'll talk about a little bit more, with the standards of the Plan of Conservation and Development. This is one of these unique situations where you've already got a split zone of property, and by actually changing the zone somewhat, you can act more consistently with your Plan of Conservation and Development and the standards of your own regulations. Because if we're forced with what we have, leaving aside the affordable housing issue, which I'll talk about in a second, you're going to end up with some sort of a little junky, I hate to use the term, convenience store area that will do nothing for the neighborhood aesthetically or otherwise.
Thank you.
Mr. Wagner.
What makes you say or think that it would just be another junky convenience store or deli and not something like, the local market or the Mercado area where it could be some more, establishment that was built in keeping with the sort of neighborhood aesthetic?
I think the economics and the location and the interest that we've received. That's the best answer I can give you.
Okay. I mean, because that's been sort of the subject of a little bit of banter, right?
Yeah.
What the expectation is.
We don't see after, excuse me.
And so I'm just trying to get a bearing on.
We've been living with the property, Commissioner, for like 4 or 5 years. And in
Right.
terms of the interest that's been shown in the property, there's little or no prospect for that kind of upscale retail use at this site, based upon the current zone.
If Mr. Franzen designed it?
Like Jack has great talent, but he can't sell the groceries, so I don't think so.
Well, because
it's really rebuttal. We should let him proceed with his argument and not cross-examine him.
I don't mind.
One question while we're here on 12.5.2, the business and professional offices. On that, don't you think the spirit of that is in a dental office or a single use like in Stratfield Center where you have that little brick building that had a dentist?
No, I'll answer that respectfully, but
Okay.
the answer is I don't. I mean, first of all, it says what it says. It says business and professional offices which primarily provide services to to customers and clients on the premises. And you'll note that when you amended those regulations not so long ago to put 4,000 square foot limitations on certain uses, you didn't do that for business and professional offices. So I respectfully say I don't think it was intended for a little mom and pop dentist. The other reason I would say that is you fairly recently approved in the neighborhood design district, you know, reasonably sized medical office facilities. The facility on Reef Road, which hopefully will be under construction soon, when combined, remember we combined the two buildings, the new building and then the old building converted to medical use, that's over 25,000 square feet. It's in the neighborhood design business district, right on Reef Road. And that gets to the point of another characterizations by Mr. Green, where he talks about this massive building. And you know, number one, it's not out of character with fairly recent precedents in the neighborhood design district, the Reef Road. And secondly, he kept talking about 50-some thousand square feet. Well, okay, we know, but the real effective usable area is 35,000 square feet of medical offices. And let's not forget, we're taking into consideration ultimately here an entire 18-acre parcel, which when you factor in the restrictive covenant, which I'll talk about again in a second, is going to be limited to no more than 5 houses. So if you want to talk about modest or massive, I would suggest to you 35,000 square feet of permitted medical office use on an 18-acre parcel, what is now an 18-acre parcel, is certainly not oppressive. Let me turn to this issue of the affordable housing, which I brought up with some, as you know, it was dragged out of me, I think, by Mr. Wagner. Look, alternative development scenarios are relevant to your planning considerations when you're looking at a zone change. There are only a number of realistic site alternatives here. One of them, beyond the one that we're here tonight advocating, is in fact affordable housing. That's not a threat. It's simply a suggestion for you in your planning function to consider alternatives and the consequences of alternatives in the context of your planning deliberations on the zone change. That's all I'm saying. But what I said to you the last time with some emphasis was I only decided to bring it up, and I've not done that before. And I agree with Mr. Green. Any lawyer who thinks he's going to serve himself or his client by coming in here with every application and trying to hit you over the head with an affordable housing stick is not doing a service to himself or his client. And I've never done that. And I don't know if I'll ever do it again. But I do know that I owe it to my client, I owe it to this commission, I owe it to myself as a resident to say that in this case, that is a very real and distinctive possibility, because that's what the phone has been ringing off the hook for. Do with that what you will, but it's not meant as a threat, nor is it inappropriate in these considerations where you're wearing that planning hat and you're looking at an 18-acre piece of property located as it is, and you're trying to make good planning decisions. So understand it respectfully, not to be a threat, but it's a potential reality, a very potential reality, and I don't think it's a very good one at all. Now, where we are is, I guess, where we started. Ultimately, you have to make a decision about this piece of property. It's a unique piece of property on 18 acres. It's located adjacent to the Merritt Parkway. It's located across the street from design commercially zoned property that has a very successful restaurant and a hotel. I firmly believe, and I think many of the residents do, that this is an application that will resolve in perpetuity all issues with respect to this property. That restrictive covenant that was given to you in draft form has been signed by my clients. It's going to be signed by the Conservancy. It's in Mr. Green's possession now. It's tendered to me, back to me, under an escrow agreement where I will hold it. And prior to any development of this medical office building or any attempt to develop it by way of taking a building permit, it will be recorded on the land record. And at the end of the day, all these questions, which will become significant, we won't have to deal with. We're going to end up with a medical office at this location. We don't dispute there's traffic issues during peak hours on the Merritt Parkway and immediately adjacent to the site. We've all been through it. That's not going to stop. We can't mitigate that. But what we can do is not exacerbate it. And I think that Mr. Galanti's analysis shows, yes, over the course of a day, 400 to 600 cars, certainly, don't dispute that. But that's stretched out over the course of the day. So we take the worst case scenario and we say, what's going to happen at the worst times? That's the peak hours. And Galanti has analyzed that for you. And what he come up with is no change. Does it make the situation better? No, it does not. Will it make the situation worse? No, it will not either. There were a couple of other comments that I just don't want to forget that Mr. Green made. I agree with him with regard to the standards here. Okay, I reviewed the Section 25 standards when we were, here last time. But let me take you back. I agree with him that the proper place to look in the Plan of Conservation and Development, because the zone change should be consistent with your Plan of Conservation and Development, is in the Sant Mortar Black Rock Turnpike section, section 2.3.6, not in Greenfield Hill. Now, beyond what I already cited to you as far as the economic issue in terms of your general planning goes, let me share with you what it says in certain parts of the Sant Mortar Black Rock Turnpike statement. Under characteristics, it says at page 38, Sant Mortar consists primarily of single-family residential development on 1/2 to 1 acre lots with condominium development adjacent to the Black Rock Turnpike commercial area. The area is bisected by Black Rock Turnpike, a state highway, which is bordered by substantial commercial development serving Fairfield and surrounding communities and carries commuter through traffic as well as local traffic. Your policies for Sant Mortar Black Rock Turnpike include efforts of commercial property owners to upgrade the visual quality of Black Rock Turnpike with building, landscape, and sign improvements should be encouraged and supported. Diversity of commercial uses, including mixed residential and commercial uses, to maintain and increase the vitality of the business corridor should be encouraged. So I agree with Mr. Green that your Plan of Conservation and Development is a document you need to study in terms of the zone change. But when you study it, I submit to you that it gives you proper authority acting in your discretion, and you have no greater discretion than in determining whether to grant or deny an amendment to your zone map. But there are certainly, looking at this document, Mr. Green has cited things to you that, if you assume this is Greenfield Hill, might vitiate against granting the zone change. But he's also referenced, and I do too, Sant Mortar and Black Rock Turnpike, and I think that supports that as well. On the text amendment, I've spoken to that. You always have, if you have one place where you have greater discretion than with the zone map, you have even greater discretion when it comes to amending your own zoning regulations. And here I ask you to do nothing more than to amend this one particular section in a manner that's absolutely consistent with the exact language you've already applied in the regulations to similar design standards. And then you come to the site plan and special permit approval. And that is, of course, the standards of approval that I reviewed with you last time in Section 25. I'm not going to review them again. Because what that comes down to in the final analysis is two things. You have to be convinced that Mr. Galanti's traffic report correctly and properly states the fact that there will not be any traffic impact of a negative nature associated with this development. And I think his report speaks to that. And you also have to find that what is being requested here is in harmony with the neighborhood that includes the Merritt Parkway and the hotel and the bar, and won't have adverse impacts on any surrounding residential properties, which are relatively distant, and most of the concerns from the people who were in the neighborhood were basically traffic-based. I think you have more than adequate record here to support a finding of satisfying that standard, subject to the setback issue, which we've focused on tonight, and which I think can be dealt with in an appropriate manner at the Commission's option. But at the end of the day, this has been a tough application. There are different opinions on it. I understand that. But as I said to you the other night, I've never felt more committed to an application, not only because I'm representing the applicant, but because I do live in the neighborhood, and I really do truly believe that if we don't approve this application, we will regret it, because it's a wonderful use of a very large and important piece of property in a manner that I think is going to be consistent with the area, benefit the community as a whole and the neighborhood in particular, and cause no adverse consequences whatsoever. And so I hope you'll consider all this in your deliberations and allow us to come back to you with a revised site plan that will adjust the 2.3-foot side yard issue that has arisen tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. This concludes the applicant's rebuttal case. The public hearing is now closed, and this meeting stands in adjournment. Thank you.